You know what's funny? I just got a notification because I get all these notifications on social media, especially on Facebook. And I have revisited our conversation a few times, since the last time you and I had spoken. And I got the notification that you and I actually had spoken. The episode got uploaded about 2 years ago. Oh, no, sorry, 2 years ago this month.
No
So it's
way.
been literally 2 years this month that your episode debuted on the channel. And it never occurred to me that just as up until now, really until I'm speaking with you, that we are basically celebrating a 2-year anniversary, the time that you and I have spoken this month as of this recording. So I thought that was quite
That's
interesting. It turned out that way.
awesome.
So obviously, we were actually reconnecting here, which I'm really happy about this year because I've been wanting to reconnect for quite some time. And then I ended up taking a break, but not a break per se, but like I kind of I equated to like an intermittent type of fasting where I would do something for a while, then I would stop and get back at it again. And the show was actually one of those things too. Not because I hate it, it's just that for some reason I felt kind of burnt out. And
Yeah,
then I
it's a lot
would
of
take a
work,
break from
I'm
it.
sure.
Yeah, it does take a lot of work, but
Yeah.
I felt a little burnt out, but I still wanted to do it, but I just wanted a break. And it ended up taking like a month or two, whatever the case was. And then once in a while, I'd just be like, I just want to talk to somebody. And then I would reach out and thankfully be somebody who wanted to talk to with me as well, too. So lately I've been really lucky where I have had people reach out to me to want to speak about whatever, maybe a project or just to catch up, but let's record it,
Mhm.
things of that nature. So it happened to be by chance that when I saw your post on Instagram where I made that comment about the film, that you happen to be one of those people that happen to say, let's go back and do this on the show again. I was like, yeah, sure. Freak chance that it happened that way. So, and then I had a chance to speak with Daniel as well too, and I'm going to be speaking with
Oh,
Steve
good.
on Sunday. So I have three people from
Perfect.
the film all in one week. So it happened to turn out to be, one thing after another, which turned out pretty really well. So I can't thank you enough for that because it gave me a lot of things to prep up for almost at the last minute, but it was fun to do it again, in a lot of ways for me. But I had a chance to check something out of yours and just to kind of recap with some things that I had seen in the past and also anything else that new that came up here. I I remember a few months ago you had posted on your socials that you were doing stand up.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I looked it up, I found it on your channel, and I caught the whole 8 minute stand up bit that you
No
did.
way.
Yeah.
Thanks,
You're
Rob.
welcome. So I have to say though that when it comes to people that I did not expect to see them do stand up, you being one of them, I was I'll be honest, I was kind of concerned. Hey, I'm gonna be a bit straight, but I was concerned like,
Yeah.
will it be funny? And truthfully, I can say that it was. And here's why I would say that. I'm saying this now because the one thing that you had said that caught me off guard that really got me laughing was when you were talking about your boyfriend. And then you were talking about moving in with him and then being a mom and a girlfriend at the same time. Didn't want to raise two children, the whole hit there. So it dawned on me that when last time you and I had spoken, I had asked about, do you ever consider about writing some stuff? And you had said you didn't at the time. And then I came across something that you had done, which I had completely forgot what it was, but it was a little short film that you had written. And
Yeah, moving coach.
I forgot what it was called, but I should have written it down. But when I had saw that you had did stand up, for some reason, it reminded me of that time of that conversation you and I had where I was wondering, are you going to get back on the horse and doing something, creative from your point of view to do something
Hmm.
that would be more to more of your personality, if you will.
Hmm.
And then I came across that, and to be honest with you, it put a huge smile on my face because I saw something that you were doing, that you were creating, and you had a narrative that was actually from start to
Oh,
finish that I found quite hilarious. I mean, I really mean when I say that as well too.
thank
So
you.
it put a big smile on my face, and I'm hoping that that will eventually lead on to other things that will hopefully get more creativity coming out of you to create some content of some sort. So when I saw
I
that,
appreciate that
that's where I was leaning more towards like this is the starting point. I'm hoping to see
for
more.
writing.
Right.
Thanks.
So
Why do you say that you wouldn't expect me to do stand up?
because I didn't think you were, I was expecting more of like a writing standpoint where you would do more like content of like television or film. For some reason, I didn't think stand
Sure.
up was something that it never crossed my mind for you to do. Like I've
Hmm.
had some people that were on that I've had on my show that have a very, very blunt personality,
Mm-hmm.
and I never expect them to do comedy, and they saw them do starting doing comedy, and they're actually quite
Mm-hmm.
funny, but it just never crossed my mind that that's something I would see them do as a creative outlet.
How
Writing content
funny.
for films and TV shows, what I come across, and that's mostly the consistent thing that I see. Unless it's a comedian that I've already
Yeah,
spoken with, they're doing comedy and then they're branching off to doing other things too, which is the standard for
sure.
most cases. So for you, on the other hand, it just never crossed my mind. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, of course, that would make more sense for me to consider that something you could also do as well too. Don't know why it never crossed my mind, but I'm glad that it did when I saw you do it. And like I said, I'm hoping that's a starting point for you to do off other things as well too. But I was just curious to see if you were actually how nervous you were because I felt like you kind of were, but you actually held your own pretty well from what I could gather because I think at certain points where whenever you would start sharing certain details about, your background and then of course your relationship, I always wondered if there was any point like you were hesitant to share some insight about your life where you once you put it out there, it's out there, and especially in a video like this. So I was wondering how if you had any hesitations, and if you did, what did you do to overcome it to allow yourself to more or less get it out there, if you will?
Yes, great question. So I was super nervous, and the reason I asked why you think I wouldn't do stand up is because the only reason I did it is because people kept telling me, you should do stand up. Do you do stand up? And people kept asking me, like, over the last couple of years, do you do stand up? You should do, they just kept saying it, and I was like, I think this is a sign. So I made it my New Year's resolution this year. And
Uh,
then by like April, I hadn't written a single joke, and I was like, okay, clearly I need some motivation. So I signed up for a class.
uh,
I took a class, it was great. And then at that show, I had a blast, and I wasn't nervous, I was just excited. And then I took another class, and the class was harder and like more analytical and stuff. And so I think I was second guessing myself more in that one, and that's the 8 minutes is from that show, like the showcase. And I was so nervous, but and how did I deal with it? I was just like, you don't have to do it ever again. Just try to
really?
have fun.
But you had
And so
fun doing
I,
it though, right? Because I mean, you seem like you enjoyed it a little bit on stage from what I could
yes, but
gather.
you said you could tell I was nervous,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
How could you tell?
The pauses and certain
Okay.
pauses, I thought that were not pauses in like you were nervous to tell another joke. I just was wondering if you were nervous because I have to look back at it again, but there was one part in particular. I forgot what you're pointing out about. I think it was when you talk about Sacramento, and you got
Uh-huh.
laughs as well too. But there was one point I thought you said one joke. At least I thought it was a joke where it was kind of quiet, and I just heard yeah, and then you moved on to the next bit, and I was like, yeah, actually
Right.
probably a little nervous right there, just due to the fact that you got a laugh, and then all of a sudden it was quiet. Not to say that they didn't get the joke. At least that's my perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
it was one of those things where I thought that to me, if, I thought that if you got a laugh, because here's the thing, I always wondered if you're doing this for the first time, if you're getting a laugh, I always wondered if does a person get confident with the first laugh, and then it's almost like okay, I
Ease
got this, and
into
I'm going
it.
from there, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden the laughs stop, and now you got to start from scratch again, and you're hoping that the next bit that you've written out or you're going to work on the spot will loosen up the situation for yourself to just keep the
Right.
momentum going despite the highs and lows that comes with the set there. And that's one thing about comedy that I always felt like um when you watch the specials, yeah, I learned this a long time ago. What you hear is not exactly what actually happened. So all the laughs you're
Right.
hearing, you think like, oh, everyone loved it, but that's not always the case. So when I saw
Yeah.
that, like I'm seeing a real life, okay, so reaction to the joke worked. Okay, so this one does, let's move on to the next one. So I don't even know how you have it structured where so this is the story that I'm gonna go with, and I'm gonna go on to the next bit, the next bit, the next bit. But sometimes I've learned a lot of comedians that they have a structure and they stay with that structure and they don't necessarily learn how to improvise. Well, this one's not going well, so let me try something else. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where a part of me was thinking about how nervous you were if you weren't getting a reaction. Were you expecting the laugh to come through? So I overthought about it, but it was just more
Yeah.
like a general view of like how you probably were feeling. But I was like telling myself, I'm just gonna ask you and see what your thought process was at that moment. But I felt like you did pretty good, and at the same time, I also felt like you
Nice.
were pretty confident, despite the little moments of like I thought you were nervous, but
Sure.
I thought you held
Yeah,
your
I think it was I was mainly nervous because I wasn't memorized either, and so I think like wasn't super comfortable with my material. Like I'd written it, but I hadn't like done it a bunch, and it's also like my first time doing it.
That
But
was your first official time doing stand up like on that in that
I mean, I was my second show in
okay.
college, like 10 years ago. I had a friend who was doing some stand-up competition. He's like, they need more people. Do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. So I just did it for fun and like ended up going to the next level. It was like you did a 5 minute set, then a 7 minute set, then a 10 minute set, depending on like how far you made it. So that by the time it was the 10 minutes, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I hadn't done stand-up since then, basically.
Mm.
And it is like you asked about talking about personal stuff, like it was the most vulnerable art form I think I've ever done because in acting, if someone doesn't like the movie or whatever, you can blame it on the writing, the
Yeah.
director. You could be like, well, it's not necessarily my performance. But with
Yeah.
stand up, you're the writer, you're the director, you're the performer. Like, if the audience isn't laughing, that's on you. Like, if they don't like you, it's just you up there alone. Even improv, like, yeah, it's on the spot, but you're still playing and being a character, and you have someone else up there with you. So stand up, it's like this is me. You just feel really naked, and so that was scary. And yeah, I was scared to talk about stuff in my personal life, and like scared to hurt people's feelings. If I'm talking about my friends or family, but I just kind of had to have like a fuck it attitude about it because it was a goal and I did it. And I took a little break. Like, I think the performance was a couple months ago. And so
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
took a break and like focusing on acting again. But it was really fun and it's like definitely empowering because it's on your time. You don't have to rely on anyone else. Like
Yeah.
with acting, if you want to film a short film, you have to get a whole crew and everything. But stand up, it's like write some jokes, go to an open mic, do it. Um,
What's the writing process like for you when you're doing stand up? Because I've seen notes and it varies, but for yourself, like
mhm.
what's that structure like for you to like know this is the openings and this is the follow up and this is the closer?
Sure. I think it was over like a few weeks. If something occurred to me that was funny, I would write it down and then like work it to turn it into a joke, like figure out the setup, the punchline, and then go to open mics, try it out, figure out which punchline works the best, like get it familiar. And then once I had all these jokes, you're supposed to put something strong at the opening. It's
Hmm.
usually a comment on like your image
Personality,
because
yeah.
that's what people see right away. So like people will make fun of themselves or be like, "Yes, this is my real hair" or whatever.
Yeah.
So I tried to do something like that at the beginning, like about Sacramento and my new haircut or whatever. And
Yeah, you
then you're
talked
supposed to,
about Lord Farquaad and I forgot the lady
yes,
from The Incredibles, which I thought was actually pretty funny.
Edna.
Yeah, yeah, Edna, right. And then you thought they would make a great
Edna
couple. So
mode.
that was I think that was your opener, if I recall correctly,
Yeah,
right?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And then they say end with something strong, so I did like one of my favorite jokes at the end, and in the middle I just kind of try to, if some of two jokes have something in common with each other, put
Hmm.
them next to each other so that you have a segue.
Right.
But other than that, like it's kind of random, but you try to give it some, like put the jokes in an order where they kind of flow.
Do you think it
But
was
I'm new,
easier
so I don't
to,
know.
as far as that creative outlet's concerned, was that easier for you to put it together and then structure it and then perform it? Was that more easier for you in that sense as opposed to say acting?
No, because
Mm.
acting, all the work's done for you, and you just have to like figure out the writing. Like the writing's done, the character breakdown's done. You just have to read it and do some scene analysis and figure out what your character's thinking. I guess they're both a lot of work, but acting I've just had so much more experience with and like been doing forever, so it just comes more natural,
Right.
I think.
Right.
Whereas stand up was definitely also like I don't have the same confidence with stand up because I'm like, am I doing this right?
But
I
do you have a
probably like
passion for
acting.
it though? Doing it once you started doing it, or at least doing it again, did you develop a passion, or was it just more like spur of the moment or encouragement from other people, and that's why you did it?
I don't think, no, I don't think I have passion for it. I think what I realized, I think I wanted to try it, and what I realized was it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And like if I wasn't acting and I just had my day job, I think I would do it. But you have to be going to open mics like 3 or 4 nights a week, writing consistently, like if you want it to be a career, and like booking shows and stuff like that. And I just don't want to put my time and energy into that because I do feel so passionately about acting that I don't want to like get sidetracked trying to do stand up. And then also it's like very little, in my opinion, it's like the payoff isn't enough for all the work. And it is
Really?
fun. And like, I think I'm still going to do open mics here and there. But as far as like trying to have a career, I don't think so. And like the stand-ups I know that do it professionally are like, it's lonely, you're touring, it's lonely, it's a lot of work, it's depressing. So.
It's funny. So you're saying you don't get like the satisfaction. Like what specifically are you referring to as far as or the payoff? Like what exactly are you referring to about that first stand up?
I guess creatively, like, because when I do acting, like the payoff is that you get to make this, you get to work with all these other people and it's really fun on set and you feel like you're some part of something bigger than yourself and you're creating this thing that's permanent and like a piece of art that other people are going to relate to and that kind of thing. And stand up has that too. Like I think that would be the payoff of stand up is like you're bringing people joy, you're making them laugh, you're giving them new perspectives on stuff they haven't thought about before, which is what all the things I love about stand up. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm good enough that I'm going to be able to give people that. And I don't know if right now I have the time to put the work in to be able to give people that.
Do you think though that let's say for example if you hit it off really well and you got a bit of a momentum as far as like we loved you, want you to come back tomorrow night, do the same joke. If you started seeing more of like or a demand for you in in some way, shape, or form, do you think your attention will be more going towards that, or you're really adamant about acting being your true passion that you want to stick with that route instead?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would put more energy into it, but I think it's very hard. I mean, I think it's hard to have both, at least right now. Like I see people stand-ups get really big and then start acting, but I've never seen an actor then all of a sudden stop acting and have a stand-up career. And I think it's because stand-up is a good, I don't know. I'm thinking of Bo Burnham, like did a bunch of stand-up and now he's
Yeah.
in movies,
Yeah.
a few like that. But that's
Well,
a good question.
I
I don't
remember
know.
Dustin Diamond, who played Screech in Saved by the Bell. He started off as an actor, and once the show stopped, because I think he did the new was it the new class after the initial cast had done their bit, and then he went straight into stand up right after that, and
Oh,
apparently he did pretty
wow.
well. So like he literally went
That's
backward, and he
cool.
points that out too in his well at the time because he's dead now, but yeah, he did sitcom and then he went straight to stand up.
Interesting. That's
So it has
cool.
happened, but he's the only one that
Yeah.
I'm aware of that did it that way, where he literally had a career in television and then went straight into
Damn.
stand up.
Yeah, I wonder why. Maybe he wasn't feeling fulfilled with acting. And it's fun to do both and it's a great way to like have your own voice and strengthen your writing.
Hmm.
Because I have been doing more writing. I take improv class at the Groundlings Theater
Okay.
and their track is like you take improv classes and then you take sketch writing and then you do a sketch show and stuff. So I took a
Right.
sketch writing class there that was really fun this year. So I feel like this year I've been doing a lot more writing and it's fun. I just think I really love performing and
Yeah.
so I think that's the other part of stand up. It's like yes, you get to perform, but you have to do all this writing. Whereas acting it's like there's already all this amazing writing done for you and then
Well, I remember last time you and I had spoken because I know I brought it up to you where I told you I was very surprised at that time that you didn't I couldn't find anything, at least before I spoke with you, that you had written or created, for you to put together, a short film, whatever it was.
yeah.
And then because you do strike me, like I said before, you do strike me as a person that would like to have more control. Like this is how I see things and what I'd rather do it this way. And then you mentioned at the time too that you preferred working with other people and have their story be told and you be a part of that, that whole part
Yeah.
creative process. And and I was actually, even after we had spoken the very first time, I was still surprised you, at least from what I can come across so far, that you didn't do that yet up until I saw you do the stand up, which I was like, oh, because this is what I was referring to earlier. Which again, like I said before,
Hmm.
I didn't think stand up was something that I'm surprised it didn't cross my mind at that time. But when you're doing all that now, are you really considering now looking into creating more of a content where television or films, or you still want to stay down that lane where you just want to stick with acting and then let the other people take over the creative process?
That's a good question. I think if I didn't have like a full-time job, I would be more involved. I think the reason I don't do my like make my own content and projects and stuff is a couple reasons. It's like it's I really like collaborating, and I think if I had a writing partner, I would be more motivated, or like a team where we already had like a DP and a actors on hand and an editor and all that stuff. But I think I'm just like it seems really overwhelming to have to
Yeah.
be the producer and the director and like get all the people and write the thing and like and then the budgeting, like how to even get the money for that. And I start thinking about it, I'm like, and then already acting so much work, auditioning, keeping up your materials,
Yeah.
auditioning,
Yeah.
shooting, I'm in
Yeah.
class. It's like acting already takes up so much time that if I also, and then at work, and then also started trying to create stuff, I think I'm just overwhelmed. And then the other thing is I have trouble doing stuff by myself. Like
Mm.
it's like, oh, I have to write alone. Like even stand up,
Yeah.
I think I would love to keep writing stand up if I had like 3 or 4 friends who were really into stand up and we met up once a week and bounced jokes off each other. But to do it alone is really hard, and like none of my close friends do stand up, and yeah, I think it would just be tough.
But because I remember last time when you and I had spoken, you told me before about being burnt out of the business. Um, is that still a sentiment you still hold to this day, or do you still
No.
feel more resurgence now?
Yeah, I totally took my break, kind of like you were saying, like
Yeah.
you stepped away. I think I was living in Hollywood for years, and then the last 2 years I was down in the South Bay, and I just kind of took a break and like stepped back and got really into beach volleyball. What was that? Sometimes if you do a hand motion on Zoom now, it like pops up an emoji. It's
Really?
not doing it. Yeah,
I didn't even
I
see
don't
an
know.
emoji.
I did this and it like waved under it.
Really? Did not even see that at all.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Ignore me. But yes, I was.
You're like, what was this? I think you're talking about me like doing something. Like I didn't do
No, no,
anything.
no. I did something and like I saw an
Huh.
emoji pop up, but
Interesting. Okay.
hopefully it's
I
not
didn't know
moving.
that. I didn't see that at all.
I think you have to have the updated Zoom, which I don't think I do. So that's why I
I
was
do
so
not know. I
surprised.
have the same one from however many years I've been using this
Yes,
here. And I
exactly. One of
prefer
my
it that
acting
way.
teachers has it though, and he does this and like hearts pop up and
Really? Oh, wow.
yeah, it's crazy. But yes, anyway, I was in the South Bay and I got really into like playing soccer again and beach volleyball, and I was
Mm,
doing all these sports and like had a really good friend group and all that, and it was enough that it made me. And then yeah, I think I took a couple years. I wasn't auditioning as much, and then La Venezia happened, and it was kind of like all the work I'd put into acting and the hustle and all that for years started paying off. Like I got this Wendy's commercial from one of my improv teachers. Like I didn't even have to try out. He just gave my name to the director, and next thing I know, I'm on set
you're on
on
the
this Wendy's
set. Yeah.
commercial. And
Okay.
then I don't even apply to audition for La Venezia. And Steve, the director, reaches out and is like, hey, you auditioned for something for me like a year or two ago. I'd like you to audition for this if you're interested. So it was kind of nice. It was like these opportunities were coming up from work I'd put in before. And so long story short, I was living in Lawndale. I was not allowed to have an AC unit because the landlord paid the utilities. So they had
Mm.
this little clause in the lease where you could not have an AC unit, but it was like 95 degrees in my apartment. And my boyfriend got me an AC unit, and I was like, oh, I'm not allowed to have it, but I felt bad, like saying return it. So I was like, let's just see what happens. I get an eviction notice.
Really?
Yes.
Just
So
for that?
then, yes. So it was
Oh,
like, you have
wow.
to take it down. So I remove it. But then there was one night where it was so hot. I was like, it's the middle of the night. They're not going to know. So I use it. Next day, I have a very real eviction notice. And so I talked to my landlord. I was like, look, I'm going to Italy to film this film in November. This was like middle of September, I got the notice. I was like, can I just move at the end of October? Like, you'll be rid of me. I won't use the AC unit. And she was like, no, you have to move. Like, you can give me a 30-day notice. And I was like, okay. So anyways, long story
Mm.
short, I move out a couple weeks before I went to Italy. And then I was going to just get a new apartment after Italy.
Mm.
Ended up being unhoused for like 6 months and pet sitting and like staying at friends' houses. And I finally found a place at the end of March in Culver City, Palms area. So now I'm like closer to, I think I missed it so much. It was like absence makes the heart grow fonder. I had my break
Mm.
and I missed it so much. I like signed up for improv at Groundlings again, stand up at the West Side. It was like as soon as I moved back, I started getting in-person auditions again. It
Mm.
was like the universe knew. So anyways, no, I'm not still feeling like that anymore. I'm feeling very motivated again.
So you're feeling more
And
optimistic, basically.
yeah, I think I
Okay.
was just burnt out and yeah, feeling pessimistic and like just
Interesting.
burnt out. And now I'm, yeah, more optimistic and just loving it again. I think I just needed a little break.
So you took a break from the last time you and I had spoken. Is that like around that time frame you had decided to kind of like step back a bit?
Yeah, and I think it was just kind of like, I'm not gonna do, I think I had been doing like all these low budget commercials and was just
Mm.
exhausted. It was like auditioning for so many. So I stopped auditioning for lower budget stuff and it just freed up a lot of time to like enjoy my life again and
Yeah,
like get in a
headspace.
better work-life balance.
Oh, okay,
So I think
okay.
that helped a lot.
Do
Yes.
you?
How was your break?
My break's kind of like I said, intermittent, where
Right.
I would do it. So you know what's funny? There have been times in the conversations where I have with somebody, and because I hadn't done it, let's say like over a month or two, I thought I did terrible. I was like, I fucking sucked, or I asked stupid questions. And I got really like bitter at myself for
Oh,
uh because I prepare as much as I can, but sometimes I know that if I do over prepare, then that's what I'm focused on. And I learned, a couple years ago to just scale back on that and have what you want to have your talking points, but don't let that be, the guy. Just kind of use it as like if I was talking to you and then you answer my question and then you just stay quiet, I'm like, all right, next question.
right. It's like a
Oh,
bad date. Like have them in case you
right,
need
right. So
another
just
question
yeah,
ready.
have another question or have something a topic. Oh, you said this or whatever else. So
Sure.
it's very helpful when someone is very engaging, but I've noticed that whenever I would go back after taking a certain amount of time off, that my confidence level for some reason wasn't as high as I thought it was because I'm ready.
Mm,
But then the moment I'm doing it, something would happen where I would ask a question, but then I noticed that I would ask 50 million questions in my head. Like, just ask this question, ask this question. That's the overpairing part of it.
right.
And then I was like, I have to learn how to scale that back because it's been a while since I've learned to do that, and I'm going back at it again. And
Yeah.
what I do in my job, I'm constantly moving, and I'm so used to just boom, 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 boom. And then when I'm talking, it doesn't flow the same way as I'm used to doing it. So it was kind of
Right.
like reevaluating how I want to go about with certain conversations. And sometimes it's very natural. Like when I'm talking to you right now, it's ebb and flow. We're going back and forth, and
Right.
it comes very naturally. But there have been times where I've been talking to some people, and I ask a question, and then I'm like, I'm staying on the question, and I realize like you gotta slow down. You were moving way too fast, and you can actually see where I'm like thinking, hold on, what's the word I want to use? And it's just like right there happening. And when I look at that, I don't cringe, but I'm like, okay, so this is what I have to work on more. So I
Mm,
still go back and I have to watch it anyways, but
right.
I go back and replay. And sometimes I go back and so I'll watch like after you and I are done talking, I will watch this conversation because I'm reading the body language and like what am I doing right or whatever else. But then I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in going back to previous conversations. Like, what's this one was a great one. What did I do right in this one? Or what did this person do to get me whatever, So I go back and revisit.
Gotcha.
A lot of time is spent on that. And then by the time I'm done watching 3, 4 episodes or whatever it is, or whatever how much time I'm watching it, I got to edit the video. And I'm like, okay, so this is what I need to work on. Is so I'm gonna cut this out and put this in here.
Mm.
They request to move this. So it's fine tuning the details, but I think what I've learned the most from taking the break was to not rush it. Like just not make it like
Mm-hmm.
like I have to get this out every single week. I have to do this. And it became really like stressful
Yeah,
on
having
top of what I
that
was doing with
pressure
everything
and
else.
deadline
Yeah.
would make it really hard.
Yeah. And then when I talked to when I talked to Daniel and several other people too, we talked about with industry how the industry is now, where a lot of that has changed, where you have to have social media. And if you have social media, what's your following? Like, do you have a
Mm,
large following? Because that way you can get gigs or whatever else.
right.
It's changed so much where um I started noticing I got more emails now, and I'm used to think, oh, these people want to talk to me. Hey, we saw your social media account. We noticed that you have all these posts, but not enough engagement with the posts. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I just had one like 2 hours ago, and then like the next week's the same exact thing. And
And it's that cookie cutter email.
yeah, yeah,
We
and
want to help you. Or,
yeah,
yeah, I
it's
get
like
this too.
it's like something that because I took a break and I got back into it, I'm seeing a lot
Mm,
more of that. So
interesting.
social media, I don't use it as much as I used to. I still use it, but not very often. And
Yeah.
it's a tool for me now. It's not like I got to use this to express. I really don't care. So
Yeah.
it's a tool, and that's specifically for that reason. And then but then I've also learned too that if you don't use it very often, then you might receive a little dip. Well, the dips I've had has always been very low. So it's and I don't want to say it as if they're
Okay.
like people don't engage with me, but it's just that I feel more compelled to focus on the quality rather than the numbers. And that's what I was doing before. I look at the numbers, and if the numbers are speaking, then you can do these things.
Mm,
And that's where I completely messed up on. So
yeah.
it was a lot of it was a refresher, a good one at that too. But then I realized I still had those bad habits where I focused on those things and I needed
Mm,
to take a step back. So learned a lot, but I I have so much energy now that I realize that I have to find a way to release some of that stuff. So I've changed up a lot of stuff too. I don't know if you remember from 2 years ago, but I was a lot heavier too.
yeah, you look super fit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I lost the weight. Actually, as a matter of fact, it happened in this in this room here where I'm at. My wife and I had this conversation one night. To make a long story short, it was like
Uh-huh.
she explained what she wanted to do. Like I'm changing this. Like she was already working out, but and then I looked at myself, I was like, I can't be like this forever. And and
Uh-huh.
I'm also a type 1 diabetic as well too. So that's another
Oh,
major factor
yeah.
as well. So I wasn't taking good care of myself. And then once I started losing the weight, I took elongated breaks in between, and everything became much more easier where I can focus on some other stuff as well too. So a lot of clarity came from the amount of
Mm,
focus on health and among other things as well too. So when I got back into doing this, it became fun. But then I remember, don't put too much pressure on yourself for this and that. Just ask the questions where you
right.
really want to ask. Don't worry about these things, et cetera, et cetera.
Good.
So it's a very long story, but that's essentially the condensed version of what I've been through in the last however many months it was. I took a break from it, so where I'm
Yeah.
at right now.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I think the one thing I remember the most with you specifically that I really did appreciate was that there's something I never told this to you, but when I had first conversed with you, there was a lot that I actually learned from you that I like I said, I never shared. And you know what I've learned was that there's something you had done that I don't experience very often, which was the pushback. So in other words, like for example, when I think in the conversation that you and I were having the first time around, I can't remember what it was we were talking about, but I think it had something to do with the fact that I was asking about why why you felt more better off you working with other people and let them have creative control and not for yourself. And then as soon as I said something to that effect, you literally just cut me off and said, "What do you mean by that?"
Oh.
I remember that moment, and I was like, "Oh, this is like a this that was brand new to me," and I was surprised how well I handled it because I was not to say I was like intimidated or anything like that, but I was actually surprised. So when I revisited that conversation, especially when I was editing it, I was like, "This is the first and only time I've ever had experience that where someone had said, 'What do you mean by that?'" Even now to this day too,
Ah,
like when this conversation you and I
no
were having,
way.
where you were like, "What do you mean by the fact that you didn't think I was going to do comedy or stand up with you?" I was like,
Oh.
that was what I was referring to, where you you were pushing back, but it was a very genuine pushback, but it was something I don't experience very often. So
Interesting.
when you had done that, especially in the email too, the email that we were going back and forth the first time around, you
Mhm.
literally said, "By the way, it's Susanna, not Suzanne." And then you said, "I didn't want to correct you, but IG does this autocorrect and this and that." And I was just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or whatever. But I remember that moment, and I was like, "This is going to be a very interesting conversation," because I was wondering, how blunt you were going to be during the conversation.
Mm,
And not to say I was intimidated, but I was telling myself, just be upfront with her about, what you think, and then let it go from there. And I think that's one of the reasons why whenever I would over prepare, is more in a sense like I want to ask questions, but I don't want to ask questions that might give off the wrong ideas. So like for example,
mm,
I had two guests. I should say I had one guest, and I had another one that I just spoke with yesterday, where I spoke with people who are in the paranormal field. I don't
mm-hmm.
believe in that stuff.
Right.
So I had a friend of mine recommend for me to speak with somebody that he knew. I had her on my show, and we've now become friends. But the first time I spoke with her, I was I didn't want to ask the questions like, well, tell me more about, if someone dies, they go to the other side. Like, why did this happen? Why do people say these things happen? Like, this is why I don't believe, and I want to know what you think, and et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So the first conversation was just kind of like generalized questions, but questions that I was genuinely interested in. But I
Yeah.
had to find those questions to kind of get to that point. After I had my conversation with her, long story short, those questions started coming out more and more. And so I reached out to her. Her name is Shannon. And I had
Mm-hmm.
reached out to her. I said, "Hey, I want to ask these questions, but the questions I want to ask are coming from a skeptic standpoint. I don't believe in this stuff, but I really want to understand where you guys are coming from with this stuff. If you can just
Right.
please educate me, that's what the conversation is going to be about." So it was almost 2 hours of that. And then I had spoke with somebody else
Cool.
yesterday by the name of Bianca, and I told her the same thing. But the only reason I want to speak with her is because I seen her do the readings and whatever else. I was like, okay, so now I know what to ask because I was trying to find the questions, but I didn't know how to fine tune it. When I saw her, I was like, oh, okay, so this is what I want to focus on. And I was able to do that, but we only had an hour. So I said, can we do another one? She said, yeah, we'll do it for next week. So we got that scheduled.
Cool.
So after speaking with you, I started to realize more and more that just ask the questions you really want to ask, and then let's see what happens after. Like, don't think about is this going to hurt? I mean, of course, it's going to be considered, but is it going to be,
Sure.
uh, is you're going to take it the wrong way, et cetera, et cetera. It
Right.
was literally after that conversation with you, after I'd, have those moments where I was telling you about, and then
Mm-hmm.
watching the video after the fact. And that's when I started to slowly
Mm.
come around, like, okay, so this is what I should start doing more often because I think I was being more diplomatic than I was, upfront, if
Curious.
that makes any sense. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
curious. That's the right way of saying it.
Right.
I've had moments like that, but it was always more like, let's be curious. And I am going to be courteous, but I'd rather ask more blunt questions about why I don't
Yeah.
believe in stuff. Explain to me why,
Right,
and then
right. That's
leave it
gonna
at
get the
that.
more interesting
Yeah.
conversation.
So
Well,
that's where I've come from
cool.
that. But
Thanks for
a
sharing.
lot of
That's
it came
very
from you from
cool.
that experience. So it's
Hell
interesting how that
yeah.
turned out.
Yeah, seriously. That's
So
funny.
I guess what I wanted to move into next with you is we'll get into the film, but I did want to ask one more thing here about I actually wanted to ask about your upbringing here because before you talked about how you said you had thick skin in the business where you dealt with a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
rejections and that, and you said you got that from your family. So I was actually really curious with you about um how that came to be for yourself, where you do strike me as a very confident person because for anyone that's very blunt, who's straightforward about how they
Mm-hmm.
approach things, I don't see a lot of insecurities, at least from my perspective, at least
Mm-hmm.
certain aspects of it, I should say. But what I was really curious with you though is because I wanted to understand about the where you've learned to develop that skill to just be straightforward, be assertive, be very, I wouldn't say abrasive, but blunt.
Hmm.
And I'm curious about that because it's like, not to say I don't see it happen often, but I don't. I feel like there's some people who are abrasive, but they're not as abrasive as they think they are, or blunt. I meant to say.
Hmm.
You do strike me as that one person that you'll speak your mind, and you don't. I'm not saying you don't care, but you're
I'm like the opposite. I am blunt, but don't think I am. Like when you say that, I'm like, really? Am I? But
I could see that you've been very blunt, because like I said, because you
yeah.
question things, you question about where I was coming from with the whole stand up thing that never crossed my mind. I didn't think you were going to do it, etc. That's a very blunt question, but it's a good
Yeah.
question to ask
It just
because
comes from curiosity too, because I was like,
right,
oh, like the reason I did it was because everyone kept telling me I should, and then you said I didn't think you ever like you didn't seem like someone who'd do it. So I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder why.
yeah. Well, most people don't ask that, and that's the
Yeah.
point I was getting at because I think that's something that's developed or that's learned from an environment that you've grown up in.
Right.
And that's where I was really curious about, especially after listening to the conversation fairly recently. I was like, I gotta figure out, I want to understand where that comes from because, especially in this business, the
Hmm.
the amount of rejections you get, and the only thing that has left you not want to continue is just that you were burnt out. But it had nothing to do with the
Hmm.
fact that you said, "Oh, I was getting rejected left and right. I was just burnt out about the politics and whatever else."
Sure.
And that's the part that I feel like that I think some people don't really understand who come into thinking that if I do this, I'm gonna give it a year. And I think that's the biggest mistake because if you're gonna do it, you got to commit to it. And
Oh yeah.
but you took a break and you got back to it. But I do believe that that has to come from somewhere. And when you said that you got that from your family, that's where I want to understand how that had come about for yourself, if you don't mind
Okay.
sharing.
Yeah. I think just thinking about the different people in my family, but I'm a middle child
Mm.
and my sister is 8 years older than me. She's my half sister. And so she was and my parents worked full time as doctors, so they were gone almost all the time. So my sister was kind of like a third parent to me. Like she was my hero. I looked up to her. I just like adored her and still do. And she has a very blunt, assertive personality, very, very strong personality. And she was the oldest, so she's very bossy. And so I think maybe like looking up to her and, kind of mimicking that maybe a little bit. And then I think my mom is very, very curious. Like she always asks a million questions, um, and is like genuinely curious about that. So maybe it's a combination of like my sister being really assertive, and then also like I was the middle child, so I was always fighting for attention, and so maybe it's like with acting. Also, I think when I don't get a role, I never think of it as rejection. I'm like, I got the audition. Like
Right.
that's an acceptance. Like
Yeah, I
that's
think you
a
said last time in the conversation that you like, oh, I wasn't right for the part, and you just kind of brushed it off
yeah.
like you let it like just slide off your back, which that was actually something I was really surprised to hear you say, because I don't hear most people say it like that the way that you did, which was why I was curious about how that goes about in here.
Yeah, I think it's just like I don't. Also, you can't have that mentality if you're in this for the long haul of like crying over every role you don't get because it most likely has nothing to do with you. And if it does, if it's about your acting, then get better at acting. And like that's the only thing you can control
Yeah.
is how hard you work. And so I've like tried to be in a class all the time, like put and like the stuff I don't get, I'm like, I probably didn't. If I did put all of the work I could into it, time, effort, passion, and still don't get it, whatever. But if I didn't and I don't get it, I'm like, that's on me. But if I do and I don't get it, I'm like, oh, it must have been a look thing, or I wasn't
Right.
right for it, or whatever.
Did you ever audition for a part that you didn't get, and then you saw someone play the part that you got, and you thought I would have done better?
It happens in commercials a lot because you always see the commercial. I'm like, oh,
Right.
I auditioned for that. And it's almost always they went with a different ethnicity or a different age,
Mm.
or they looked more like the kids in the commercial or whatever. So with commercials, I'm not like, oh, and also everyone does a great job in commercials. You're like smiling and like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Coca-Cola. But for film, I don't think I've ever seen. I'm trying to think. It happens when I audition for my friends' films, and
Mm.
then they'll be like, "Oh, like we loved your audition, but we went with someone who was actually like this is a real example. A friend of mine did a short, and they wanted a girl who was cottage core, like
What is
really
that?
into I don't it's some aesthetic where it's like you dress like you're live in a cottage and you like cottage stuff. I don't know, but it was a
Mm.
comedy I auditioned for. They were like, your audition was amazing, but we ended up going with a girl who was actually core in real life because she just like was the character, you know? So I'm like,
Okay.
I feel like casting knows what they're doing, and no, I've never thought like, oh, I would have done a better job just because I'm like, oh yeah, I see it.
But do you ever get the feeling of like when you look at something you didn't get and you think, I wish I would have gotten that because I would have loved to.
Oh,
So you get that a lot?
I get that with stuff I haven't auditioned for all the time. Like if I'm watching
Mm.
a TV show, I'm like, oh my God, I would have killed to play this role. Like my dream role is Molly in Molly's Game. Jessica Chastain plays her. She does it
Oh, yeah,
perfectly.
yeah, yeah. That was a good movie.
Yes, it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies, and it's like I love poker. I love
Oh, you play?
acting. Yes,
Are
I
you good?
love Texas Hold'em. I used to be better. I played a lot during COVID. I haven't played it in a while, so
Okay.
I'm out of practice. But I just love poker, and like that's such a cool role. And it's Sorkin,
Yeah, yeah.
and so there's stuff like that where I'm like, or a Tarantino movie. I'm always like, oh, I could have played that girl, but I didn't get. And then I just get pissed off that I'm not getting the auditions
Mm.
because I'm like, I didn't even get a chance.
Do
So I
you
think
have
that's the irritation.
do you have a manager or agent too that helps with that, or is this all on you
Yes.
completely?
I have an agent. I don't have a manager.
Okay.
Funny you say that. I just emailed my friend's manager today because I'm like, I haven't had a manager in a couple of years. And at first I was like, this is great. Like one less person to pay on every single role. And like
Yeah.
my old manager wasn't getting me auditions or anything. So I was like, this will be better. But now that I'm like getting back into it, I'm like, yeah, I want someone else on my team, and like I have an agent, but like someone else submitting you for auditions and pitching you doesn't hurt. So I'm
Mm.
gonna start looking again for that.
Do you think, because when I was talking to Daniel about that, like he was explaining, which I almost forgot about this, where he was talking about how having a manager and agent, it gives you a leg up where there are some things that they have access to as far as like parts you
And the
could audition
actors
for,
don't. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And the
yeah.
actors
Like
don't,
we
and
can't submit for TV network
right,
roles.
right.
Yeah, and
So
studio films.
is that something you're aiming to look at? Is that the reason why you wanted to get a manager and an agent in this case here to help with that, to be able to push you off that next level, if you will?
And like I have an agent who submits me for that stuff, but like he has, the agents get you in casting rooms based off their relationships with the casting director
Yeah.
sometimes too. So it's like if you have a manager and an agent, that's two different sets of relationships with casting that, or two people submitting you for the same thing. And so if they're seeing you twice, like maybe you're more likely to get called in, but who knows? It's
Yeah.
all kind of a mystery to me.
Do you do you feel if you do get more auditions for yourself, I guess what I'm really want to ask is like, has anything changed about how you're going about it for yourself? So in other words, like, you when you told me before in the past that how you when you used to play sports, you at certain times well, actually most of it, I think if I recall correctly, you had said that you kind of dreaded going to practice and having to
Oh,
play, and then when
right.
you went to do theater, it was completely different. You had
So
a much
fun.
more enthusiastic approach and outlook on those things. Um, so obviously you did it because you loved it, and I know you still do, but do you have a perspective now where, because I asked this to Daniel, and the reason I asked Daniel this question because I had a conversation with a producer and Jonathan, who when I had asked him like why you, what exactly are you looking at when it comes to the production? Like, what are you looking for? So we're looking to make money. This is a business. I got to find out who's can sell the film, who can bring attention, et cetera, et cetera. From the actor standpoint, I figure it's the same thing, but I'm sure there's some variations of some certain differences with certain people for those reasons. But has anything changed for you at all about when you're looking out in this case, getting a manager? Are you looking at yourself as a brand where here's what I can do? I can I have experience in this particular field as far as the roles I played, and I'm looking to do these things now. Are you looking from a business perspective, or are you purely looking in the sense like I feel like I can do these parts because I know I can play them, you I can play them well, whatever else. But I hope this question makes sense. But I'm sure you understand where I'm going with this here.
The question's like why
Like, what changed for you?
why
Like, if anything's changed for you about going as far as acting is concerned, like, has anything changed at all? So, apart from purely loving it, but you're looking at from under a perspective of business, where if I do this here, this will get me the here, and if I do this, this will get me there. So the network aspect of it as well too.
yeah. I
Does
think
that change it for you a little bit?
yeah, I think before I had been just kind of like bumbling along, doing a lot of commercials and like not putting as much effort into TV and film side, where now I'm like, I literally had a conversation with my commercial agent last week where I was like, don't submit me for, we were basically like, only union commercials. If it's non-union, like it's really not worth my time. Like I don't want to, like commercial acting isn't my dream.
Right.
And if it's just gonna be more time I'm spending not doing TV and film, like it's got to be something really good, like a union commercial or something. There's a lot of commercials right now that are shooting all over, like Japan, Mexico City, Argentina, like all these cool places. I'm like, if it shoots somewhere cool, I would love to do it. But if it's like a low budget non-union commercial in LA, like I would rather go to my acting class that day than go to this audition. And
Mm.
so I think I'm just what's changed is I got burnt out on commercials and realized like this isn't, they're super fun, great money, love doing commercials, but at the end of the day, like that's not what's fulfilling me creatively. And so I think I've just decided to put like way more energy and time into training for TV and film, building those relationships. Like I did 2 or 3, I think it was this year, maybe it was last year. I did like a few short films for free. I hadn't worked for free in years for acting. And I was like, I don't care. I just want to do creative stuff, like fun film stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to start. So I did a student film for USC that was really fun. I did a film with a stand-up comedian who was hilarious, and that was really fun. And so I think like that has been the biggest change for me, is putting more effort into like, for me, narrative stuff
Right.
versus commercials, which
Do
is
you
very
do you,
product.
do you still hold on to that same thought process where you don't look back at your films or reels or whatever else you do from the past? You still have that mindset where once I watch it once and then I'm moving on.
No, I mean, I just had to go back and look at some footage because I was putting together a new reel,
Mm.
and that was pretty fun. I was like, oh yeah, I did this, and oh yeah, I did this. So um, I don't like have a strict rule where like I watch it once and then never again. I think it feels very self-indulgent to like watch my own stuff a bunch, so
You
I
feel
don't do
that you
that.
really do
But
feel that way? That self-indulgent if you watch your stuff and you're like, "Oh, it was pretty good." Really?
no, not like that. But I feel
Oh.
like I also there's so much stuff
I must
out
be
right
so
now. Like,
conceited because I watch my own stuff all the time. So
but you're doing it from like an analysis perspective.
yeah,
I
I
think
am, but
there's
it's
so
one.
much
Yeah,
there's so much TV.
yeah.
There's so many TV shows out right now. There's so much amazing films out right now that like I feel like there is not enough time in the day for me to even watch the stuff I want to watch that I haven't seen before, let alone rewatch. Like I don't even rewatch I have so many films I love that I would love to rewatch, and I'm like, no, don't rewatch them. You have to watch new stuff.
Like which ones are you talking about that you will love to rewatch?
Like The Parent Trap or Lion King or Without a Paddle, just like stuff I loved growing up that I've seen a million
Oh,
times.
okay.
You know, like the movies you watch for nostalgia, or
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Bridesmaids, like it's gonna
Yeah,
make you laugh, or Pulp Fiction, like
yeah.
just classics and like really great films that you love. And then there's movies I've seen once that I loved, like The Important Life or The Exciting Life of Walter Mitty.
Oh, the
There's
Ben
all
Stiller
these
movie?
movies. Yes.
Yeah, I
There's
know
like
what
all
you're
these
talking
movies I saw in theaters and loved and would love to watch again. But then that's time that I can't watch the new stuff that's coming out, and I feel behind. And like I feel like part of my job as an actor is to know what's out right now,
about. Oh, I
like
see what you're saying.
watch the new stuff. So let alone watch my own stuff over again. I'm like, no, I don't have time.
I guess now we can jump into Love Venezia. Is that pronounce the name?
La Venezia. I'm sure everyone says it different, but I'm not
Well,
Italian, so I don't
no,
know.
I talked to Daniel and I was like, "How do you say?" He's like, "Love Vene every single time. Love Venezia." Is how what he would always say it. So Venezia. Oh, I could be wrong. I
Venezia,
might have just butchered
Venezia.
that
I don't
word.
know. He's probably right.
Yeah,
Venezia,
yeah.
Venezia. I don't know. I
So
should know. I was there for a week
you were only
in
there in Italy
Venice.
for a week?
I was in Venice for a week.
Okay.
They shot for a couple weeks in LA, and then they shot for 2 weeks in Italy, I believe. I shot for a couple. I was just on a couple days in LA, and then 1 week in Italy. I mean, 1 week in Venice,
Mhm.
and then I traveled after. I took some time off work, and since they only needed me for a week, I was like, "Cool, I'm gonna stay another week." And I went to Murano and Burano, the islands, and then Verona,
Oh,
Bologna, Florence, Rome, and like Pisa for a day. It
really?
was awesome. I'd never been to Italy, so I was like, I'm
You've
not
been
gonna go
overseas before to Europe?
home. Yes, I have family in France, so
Oh, that's
I think that's
right.
probably why. As I always, when we went over, we were going to France to see my mom's brother's family, and like I've been to a couple weddings in France, and family reunions. So I think that's probably why we never went to Italy because we had business in France.
Do you speak French
Yes, not very
fluently?
well
Oh,
anymore.
okay.
I used to, and
Oh,
I was a
okay.
minor in French in college, and I was pretty fluent. And one of my French cousins stayed with me a couple weeks ago with his boyfriend, and they, his boyfriend spoke great English but spoke more French. And so I was trying to speak in French with him, and I was like, basic words were not coming to me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so rusty. So I'm doing Duolingo now because I was like, this is embarrassing.
You know what? That reminded me of something that I came across with. I'm glad we're talking about this because I think I saw you do a commercial where you spoke Spanish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, you were you at all familiar with the language, or you had to learn that for the role on that
No,
commercial?
I speak Spanish a bit. Like they at my elementary school,
Hmm.
because I grew up in California. At my elementary school, they taught it Spanish, and then I took it in middle school too. And then I worked in a restaurant for 5 years where the whole kitchen was Latino and
Yeah.
spoke Spanish with them. And then yeah, I think I was getting a lot of Spanish auditions. So I was like, oh, I should keep practice, and like all my Spanish speaking friends helped me, and I love the language. And like this last year, one of my friends is from El Salvador, and she got married
Mm,
there, and I'd been there before once, so I went back and went to Guatemala too, and my boyfriend and
mm.
I went to Peru. So I was like, oh, I'm going to all these Spanish speaking places. I better stay on it. And
So,
then for
no, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Go
I was just
on.
gonna say for the La Venezia film is Venezia. I should know how to say that. I'm gonna go with what you said. For La Venezia, I was like, I gotta learn some Italian. So I did Duolingo for like probably 4 or 5 months before I went. And I
Really?
would just speak in Italian to everyone at restaurants. And if I didn't know the word for it, I would say it in Spanish with an Italian accent. And all the waiters were like, you speak very good Italian. I was like, no, I don't. You don't have to lie to me.
So when you're learning the language, are you trying to get down the accent for those in this case, like for French, Italian, and Spanish? Because if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've seen that commercial that I'm talking about here, but I do remember you could hear your American accent.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I picked it up right away. But
Yeah,
I
that
will
makes
say though
sense.
that the pronunciation were really good. Like you pronounce everything pretty good actually, but
Just
you
the
could still
accent is
hear
still evident,
the
right?
accent is
Even
still
if,
very much there, but
yeah.
I could tell um that to me, it didn't feel like you'd struggle with it, which is why I was asking if you spoken it before because I almost it almost felt like it was second, at least to me, it felt like it was second. But you've already confirmed that for me now.
Right.
But I always wondered that if you were intending on learning this, if you're speaking the languages, are you speaking with the accent or you just speak what you can with the American accent that you
No,
could?
definitely the accent. I think that's half the fun
Yeah,
is the accent, like, and the tone of it. Like, languages are so cool because
yeah,
it's not only different words, it's like different musicality
yeah.
and a different way. And with Italian, I was like doing the, like I was like, una pizza per me, por favore. And they're like, that is not how anyone actually
Yeah,
speaks Italian. They're like, if anything, it's like in the south of Italy. They were all
yeah.
like, you sound like you're from southern Italy, but in
Okay,
the north,
yeah.
it's not like it doesn't have that.
Could
Pizza
you
pie.
could you pick up accents? Like in this case, like for French, do you have a good ear for how if so where someone's from the country or and even with Spanish as well too? Do you have a good ear for that?
In French, if they talk really, really fast,
Hmm.
they're usually Paris or like a
Parisians,
city.
yeah.
But in the South, they speak slower and like, yeah, I guess you kind of can. And in El Salvador, I could understand everyone at the beach and in the mountains and or in the beach and the city, like full conversations. And then I went into the mountains
Yeah.
and I
It's a
was
whole
like,
different beast.
is this still Spanish? And like, I could not understand this one guy. And I talked to, we had a guide for this volcano hike. And I was asking
Oh,
him, I was like, I can understand you perfectly, but this other guy in the mountain, he was like, oh yeah, even I can't understand them
yeah.
sometimes. He's like, it's so hard. So that is funny that like in France, the city, it's harder to understand people because they speak so fast.
Yeah.
But in El Salvador, it was the opposite. It was like easier to understand people in the cities than in the mountains.
What
Yeah.
what uh what language was easier for you to learn I wouldn't say the quickest, but just to get the lingo down pretty good.
Probably French. You'd think it would be Spanish, but maybe I'm just not saying that because I think Spanish is so much easier, actually. Like French is hard to hear
Yeah.
because they don't say all the letters. It
Yeah.
all kind of sounds the same. Whereas Spanish, you say every single letter that
Mm.
is on the page, you hear. French, it's like the word could be this long and it's one syllable because it's like E-A-U,
Yeah, yeah. I know you're telling me, yeah.
like bow. Yeah.
So, would you
However,
ever consider doing something like that for yourself, where you play a character with that speaks a completely different language and then put on the accent? Would you be comfortable doing that for yourself?
I don't know. I think especially now, like representation's getting better, and they want they want gay actors to be played by real gay people. They want Latino characters to be played by real Latino actors. So I don't, if I'm like taking a role away from someone like a minority thing, then I would feel uncomfortable. But that being said, like all the people I've talked to, like Latinos are like, I don't care if you play Spanish speaking roles.
Yeah.
Like I play English speaking roles.
Yeah.
And like same with gay actors. Like I don't care if you're playing gay. I play straight roles.
Yeah.
Like they're not possessive about it, but I think with the whole like PC culture and cancel culture, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's tricky. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think I'd have
it's
to
like you're
have
walking
some
on thin ice at
conversation.
that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want people to be like, this white girl playing a, Spanish character with an accent. And I think that's the other thing is like, it's one thing to be speaking the language, but then if you get into like accent territory, it gets tricky and
Yeah.
you don't want to be appropriating. So I don't know.
Well,
I
it's
think it
funny
would just
because
depend.
like I look at somebody like Giancarlo Esposito, who's played Puerto Ricans. He played a Chilean who grew up in Mexico from, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Right.
And
He's
he was actually
amazing.
somebody that I remembered when I first heard him because I knew him beforehand from the Spike Lee movies he's done well beforehand. And I remember I'll never I forgot the name of that movie that he did with the guy from B2K. I forgot it, Omarion, I think it was. I can't remember his name. Well, anyway, so he plays a Puerto Rican character in the movie, but he put on a really, because I grew up with Puerto Ricans too,
Yeah.
put on a
Thick
great
accent.
Puerto Rican accent. I'm talking about
Oh, cool.
beautiful Puerto Rican accent. And I was like, holy shit, this is the same guy from Do the Right Thing. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Then when I had heard him do the character of Gus in Breaking Bad and
Breaking
also in
Bad.
Better Call Saul, his accent, him when he spoke English, was on par because I also grew up with Mexicans as well too. So I knew the
Right.
accent very
He's just
well.
amazing at that, I guess.
It's incredible, and I personally love seeing that as well too. But when
Right.
I heard him speak Spanish, I could tell right away, oh, hey, this is not his native language because you have the other guys
Oh,
who are putting
interesting.
on, they're putting on their Mexican accent, they're speaking with him, and all of a sudden you
Yeah.
hear him, and you can tell he worked his ass off, but that
Oh,
American accent was creeping
still
out every
coming
once in a
through.
while. So it didn't take me out, but it was like, oh, I can tell. But
Right.
thankfully the scene was so good. He was great. All the other people were great
That it
that
wasn't
it
distracting.
wasn't too distracting, but it was like those things that was just kept like itching. I was like, oh, I can notice it. But it was one of those things that it worked, but unless you don't speak the language, you probably won't even take notice of it at all. I think most people will listen to it and think, oh,
Yeah.
it's perfect. It's perfect, yeah. But the accent's still there.
It's
So
technically perfect, but yeah.
yes.
I just read this. It's funny you bring him up because I just read this article about him on, I think it was Casting Frontier, and I gotta find it and send it to you because it was about him getting typecast or something and then starting to play, reveals his early career struggles. Here it
Yeah.
is. Blah, 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 blah. The Emmy nominated has been working in the industry since his Broadway debut in '68.
Hmm.
Career struggles. Initially, when roles for black actors were scarce, Esposito played an African American slave child opposite Shirley Jones in a short lived musical. I knew that I wanted to play characters who were more expansive, he says, so he started to play around with his appearance.
Yeah.
And then he said, when I was really young, I realized my hair would do anything. I could sweep it back, slick it down, I could look more Spanish.
Yeah.
In turn, the young actor learned to speak a little Spanish. It was really survival. But what
Yeah.
I realized in doing that is I was expanding myself. So he was originally just going out for black characters, and then he like played with his hair and
Yeah.
learned Spanish to get more Latino roles.
It reminded me of
I'm gonna
another
send you this.
actor that comes to mind too. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the actor Cliff. What's his name? Cliff Curtis, the New Zealand actor. He was I'm trying to think of a movie you would have seen him in. You ever seen
Cliff
Training Day?
Curtis. Yes, I've seen Training
Okay,
Day.
so remember that kitchen scene where Denzel drops off Ethan's character with
And with the
the Mex
wheelchair mom?
No, 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 no. This is the
Okay.
scene with all the cholos. They're at the table playing
Uh-huh.
cards,
Yes.
and so you have the three guys, the three Mexican guys.
Yes, yes, yes. It's like
So
toward
the
the end.
Right, right, and then you
Yeah.
have the guy with the mustache who was what's his Smiley? That was his name in the movie,
Uh-huh.
Smiley. He had the tank top, the whole getup, right?
Yeah.
I am very familiar with that actor. I knew who he was before. I saw him in
No
what was it called?
way.
Three Kings with Mark Wahlberg, where he plays a Middle Eastern guy. He also
Okay.
played Pablo Escobar in Blow. He
I
played
should.
a South American in Colombiana with Zoe Saldana. So the point I'm getting is that I was very familiar with who he was. What I didn't know for a long time was that he was from New Zealand and he's Maori. So
Wow. Yeah,
like a
yeah,
Polynesian
yeah.
background. And he's pointed out
Cool.
before that my I love my skin color. It's given me more opportunities than most people will realize. When I was like, oh, it's true. He's played Hispanics, he's played Middle Easterns, he's played
Yeah.
Americans, like whatever else. So I'm pointing out him because I remembered that scene specifically. It was one of my favorite scenes in the movie because now I grew up with Mexicans, but I never grew up with like Chicanos. I've those
Hmm.
that's all like West Coast stuff. I've been around them, but not enough for me to like really know the
Know
culture
the
that well, other
accent.
than from what I've seen in films and whatever else.
Hmm.
So when I heard him speak, he literally got it down so good to the point where when he did speak some Spanish, which was mainly Spanglish, he would just say
Yeah.
que no, whatever else. Really simple stuff, but he was on point. And I thought like this is like to me, that's what acting is at the end of the day, where you're literally starting you're playing a character and you get to become that character. So I see like Giancarlo Esposito, Cliff Curtis. None of them are Hispanic, but they're playing Hispanic parts, and they are so good at it. So I understand your perspective. Believe me, you're not the first person I spoke about this here, and you're actually not the first
Yeah.
person that I spoke with as well too that plays Hispanic parts. And I've had I think one person kind of like show some slight hesitation where yeah, well these are the parts that I was getting, and there was the only ones I can get. So I was just taking whatever I could. I was like, well, it's not a bad thing, It's just
Yeah.
it's an opportunity. I would think. But yeah, the whole culture has changed a lot, and I think for the better. I think the execution of it can be a little, you know, tough to to discuss and get a real conversation because I think it's all just quick talk points and then they move on. At least from my
Right.
perspective.
I know, and it's hard to know. Like, I mean, you see that. What was that movie? It was like about Egypt, and it was like all white actors with
Oh,
like
Gods of
faked
Egypt.
hands. Yeah,
Yeah, Gods
exactly.
of
Like,
Egypt.
I don't. Yeah,
Well,
but
I
it's
think their argument was that well, we're playing gods, so gods can be anything. I was like, yeah, I can see your argument there. It's a good one, but I don't think it's a valid one, in my opinion. I mean,
there's
Chadwick
something
Boseman's in
off
the movie
about
too.
it.
Yeah, it is off, but Chadwick Boseman's in that movie. I think he was probably the
Oh
most accurate
yeah,
character.
yeah. R.I.P.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's funny how things have turned out. But
Yeah.
I want to get back to Love Venezia, I think is how you pronounce it. But so we discussed about the film. Now, I have not seen the movie, and I know Daniel had seen because I had asked him about it. Have you seen the
Yes.
film?
Yes, I've seen it twice. I saw it once at the director's house. He did a screening, but it
Okay.
was before the sound was wrapped. And then I
Okay.
saw it recently again at the Culver Theater, which is like a 15-minute walk from my new place. So that was
Really?
really cool. And the sound was done and it looked and sounded amazing.
So the first time you saw it though, were you happy with how everything turned out, at least up to that point? Considering
Yes.
it's not it wasn't finalized as of yet.
Yeah, I was really, really pleasantly surprised. And like, I knew the story was amazing. I knew the actors were great. Like, I knew all that. But when we were shooting it in Italy, it wasn't like, it was quick. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
let's steal a shot here. Oh, let's steal a shot here. There wasn't a ton of setup and lighting. So I was like, I don't know how this is going to look, but it looks so beautiful. Like the cinematographer, Hanuman, he is some kind of magician or wizard because he didn't have a lighting crew. He didn't have anyone, it was just him and the camera and like somehow he made this like one of the most beautiful cinematic films I've ever seen. And like there's this shot when we get to Italy and it's just
Uh,
like breathtaking.
I want to bring this up before I forget here.
Yeah.
So the first time you and I had a conversation, this was after I had seen the movie Normal, and I had asked you about your nude scene. And when I saw
Yeah.
the trailer, and seeing that Daniel was the lead and saw that some of the stuff that happened
Yeah.
there, I never once considered asking a guy, your perspective on nudity. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until I actually heard a conversation that he had prior to me speaking with him where he did a play out in Palm Springs. I forgot the name of the play out offhand, but he had said that, I have a butt shot on stage, but I'm covered up, but it's just a quick butt shot. Took a lot of convincing for me to get to that point to feel comfortable with it. And I was like, oh, I never thought about it that way for a guy. Because not to say that I
Yeah.
assumed that all
Super
guys would be okay
vulnerable.
with it. Right.
Right.
And then having seen the trailer, with the sex scenes that he has in there, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm gonna ask this to him. So he
Smart.
he gave me a really interesting point that I remember I thought about you at that moment, but I guess what I was curious about with you was the fact that since you're, I was actually curious from your perspective when you read the script, saw the film, did you have any sort of like, oh, I know what he was going through at that point during those scenes. Like I understand the vulnerability and so on and so forth. And if you ever had a conversation with him, I'm not even sure if you had a conversation with him beforehand about, hey, I did a nude scene as well too. This is what I went through. This is how I dealt
Mm,
with it. Maybe pass along something to him to help him with it. Because he seemed like he was telling me that, if I remember correctly, the first scene he had shot with, I forgot the actor's name, the Italian guy. Um,
Alex.
Alex, yes, thank you.
Hmm.
They shot the first scene together, and it turned out to be quite a wonderful experience for him. And then they saved
Yeah.
all the other stuff, like the sex scenes, towards the end of the shoot, so that way it can just be focused on them. They can get all these stuff out of the way, and they focused on him. And he said that actually
Yeah.
helped him out a great deal.
And
So,
gives them time to get to know each other instead of just
right,
like,
right,
Daniel, this is Alex, and go.
true. So, but I was curious about when you saw that, or when you read it, and then you saw it. Did you have any perspective about um like from your own experiences with normal seeing that, like did anything cross your mind about having
No,
to see that for yourself?
yeah, that's a fantastic question. When I read the script, I was like, oh, wow, this is a really hard role for whoever is
Yeah.
playing Michael. It's a very vulnerable role. It's a lot. And I would thought, my character doesn't have to do any of that. Like, I think I was like, oh, like, I'm always up for a challenge, but I think I was relieved that I was like, oh, in this one, in this project, it's not going to be me. Like
Right.
I've been the one that has that's in all those more challenging, vulnerable positions, and I'm like, oh, that'll be nice not having to do it in this one. And that being said, I was like, this is going to be a tough role for Daniel. And when I saw it, like I just told him like you're so vulnerable in this and like you played it so beautifully and great job. But I didn't think to like talk to him about it before. I think I met him for the first time on set, I think on set in LA, and so there wasn't like a we didn't get to know each other before, and I think maybe I didn't think to ask because it seemed like too deep or too personal to be like, how are you feeling about the nude scenes? But now that you mention it, I
Yeah.
should have, and now I feel bad that I didn't say like, have you done nudity before? How are you feeling? Do you want any advice if you're feeling
Right.
nervous or anything like that? I just it didn't. I think I probably didn't want to pry, but now that you mention, I'm like, oh, that would have been nice of me to do.
So this is an interesting question for me to ask you about the fact that, because in the movie you play his best friend, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was able to watch a few scenes that
Hmm.
Steve had sent over to me. And there's six scenes in total. One of them were obviously with you, and it was you, him it was a scene. It was in Italy
Hmm.
where I keep forgetting Daniel's character's name, but he comes out and then he's almost like out of it, and he's like, I want to leave because he wasn't feeling well, and you're, I'm going to be there for
Right.
you, and so on. And then the other scene with you and him, it was with another guy who had a mustache, and he was talking
Yeah.
about what was it the glass making process that
Murano glass
yeah,
and
exactly.
bidets. Yeah.
Yes,
That's a
that
fun
whole bit,
scene.
which actually was a good scene. I did enjoy that scene a lot.
Yeah.
But so my question was really about the fact that you said that you met him for the first time, you believe, on set in LA,
I
but you
think
got to play his
so.
best friend, and you didn't have time to, to really get to know him. Is that kind of difficult too? To having to do something like that where you meeting a guy for the first time, and then all of a sudden, all right, now you're best friends, and let's do the scene now.
I think it would be really hard if it was with people who weren't an actor or it was their first time acting
Right.
or they didn't know how to create that chemistry. But I'm really lucky. Almost all actors I've ever worked with are very, very good at creating chemistry immediately. And like um, Daniel did that, Zaramak did that. Like the three of us met that night and then did that dinner scene. I don't know if Steve sent you that scene, but it's in LA. We're at a restaurant and I'm in a blue dress.
No,
Okay. So,
no.
but there's this scene where we're in LA and like Daniel, Michael tells us he's going to Italy. And I'm like, well, you should probably bring a friend. oh, I'll go. And it like the three of us decide to go together. And so that was our first time. But no, it wasn't, because you also have your lines and like you can run it a couple times while they're setting up lighting
Right.
and I think the thing about good friends is they're not afraid to interrupt each other. They aren't afraid to tease each other, give each other shit. So I think like just thinking about how do I act with my good friends and then using that, and would this relationship involve that? Oh yeah, they're good friends. They're not afraid to, and just treating them like you would. So I don't think it's hard. And like, I think especially with commercials, I'm always playing a mom, or like a lot of times I'm the mom. So then I have a husband that I meet that day and we're immediately like on camera being married. And so, that actually happened. Like a month ago, I did a Marriott commercial and the guy playing my husband and I didn't know each other, but we got along great. And like the client came up to me and was like, have you guys worked together before? It seems like you've known each other for 20 years. I'm like, no, just doing our job. But
What's actually so I want to go more in depth with you about that when it comes to because I never thought about asking this question up until you mentioned about how you were able to click with a lot of actors that happen to be really good at their job and you're able to connect and then make it very believable, of course. But have you ever had that experience where you worked with somebody and you had to play, whether it be intimate partners, good friends, whatever the case may be, and you just did not click with them at all, and then you have
yes,
to make that happen to make it believable? How do you
yes.
deal with that?
Oh, it's so awful. It's happened with me before where, oh, it was so awful. It's like, it was a romantic interest and like,
Uh,
yeah, like I couldn't stand the actor. He would just talk incessantly, like right before the scene, like when you're trying to like, kind of go, I'd be like trying to go over my lines in my head or like take a beat and get in character, and he's just like, and I don't want to say anything and be rude, like, can you please shut up or whatever. So I've definitely worked with actors where I could not stand them, but my character was in love with them, and it just makes your job way harder. Like it's still doable, but it just makes it harder
when
because
you
you have
watched
to.
when you watched that after the fact, do you believe you did a good job to make it convincing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I can't see myself like, oh yeah, I can tell I was really annoyed. I'm like,
Uh,
good job, you covered it.
okay. Okay.
But
So,
that's a
but
good question. I'm
but
sure there's something.
but explain to me then about the process of like of having to get to know somebody the day of, especially when you're coming into a role where it requires to show that you have a lot of years with the person, good friends, relationships, whatever the case may be. Do you are you one of those people that can really are you good at finding a flow with somebody and then just pick it up from there, or do you have to take the time to get to that headspace or get to that more or less that feeling, if you will, so that by the time you get on camera, it's easy at that point? Because
Mm,
sometimes I think that because I've heard plenty of like I remember what was the movie oh, it was The Notebook. I remember that.
mm-hmm.
I've only seen it once because my wife wanted to see it.
Oh,
And this is before I knew about the whole behind the scenes drama between Rachel McAdams
and
and
yes, Ryan
Ryan
Gosling.
Gosling.
Yeah,
I thought they were great
so
together.
funny. Also, I don't know if all that was even true or if it was
That
like
too.
media, because they
Right.
also edited all these interviews where they
Right.
just took her reactions or her answers to something else
Yeah.
and like cut it with a different question.
Right. But I think
But
what
yeah,
at the time I believed it, and I remember hearing that it's not
right,
necessarily true, but then when you hear them talk about it, it's like they're leaving out some. Like, if you're
right,
talking with like about Daniel working with him, there's a different body language you would have, of expression you have. I loved working with Daniel; it was a great experience. Whatever the case may be, you can
right.
tell. Sometimes you
Yeah,
could tell that wasn't the case, but
sure, sure.
I'm sure maybe they were having a bad day. But the point I'm getting at is that when I look at that movie, when I saw it that one time, I thought they were great together.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that I've learned after the fact that they did not get along well at all together on screen, to me speaks, well, that's,
Speaks to their
they're obviously the
acting.
professionalism,
Yeah.
their capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So something about that really like appeals to me how someone who just goes on set hates somebody and they work with them and then comes out beautifully on the screen. Like I think Mad Max Fury Road was another good example. Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy hated each other, but when you
Wow.
watch the movie, I mean, yeah, they did in the
Yeah, you can
movie, but
tell.
then they got along at the end, and then
Yeah, it's
they're
kind
on
of
the
like
premieres, they're talking whatever else because I guess they got
right,
over
right,
it.
right.
But when I hear those stories, like something about the way that they're able to switch, put on the act, and then maybe go back to what they were doing beforehand, where they just don't talk to each other, or argue, whatever that
Right.
is. I find that really, really fascinating how they're able to do that. But for you, on the other hand,
Substitution.
when you're approaching with somebody like that, like I don't know if it's something that you've learned to do, or is it just like I said, much more natural? Because like last time I spoke with you about this is like you've got a lot of roles that were very similar to your own personality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the case here, but I'm assuming it kind of is, where you have some
Mm-hmm.
similarities with your character. So I would imagine
Yeah.
that might help out a little easier, where you can just find that flow and then
Mm-hmm.
incorporate what the performances and your in whoever you're working off of here. So it's a elongated question, but that's essentially what I'm trying to see. Like, how easy is it for you to be able to put on the switch and then put on the act just after you just moments of meeting the person, and then have to go on to work on a full scene and then carry that same momentum after the fact?
After the fact of what?
After you do the first scene with them, and then you got to carry on that same momentum with the next scene after that, because like I think from what I'm understanding with you, you got along with everybody, at least from what I'm understanding. But when you don't, you still have to keep
Yeah.
that same momentum.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
I
I'm
don't
interested
let
in.
them know either, like,
Okay.
because that's unprofessional too. Like, it's not just about being professional when you're acting. It's like you don't want to argue with people on set in between or make it uncomfortable for anyone else or hurt anyone's feelings. So, but it is hard as someone who usually speaks my mind or whatever to keep my mouth shut. And it's just and like as far as the scene starting and like acting coming into play, like it's called acting for a reason, and
Right.
you gotta act like you like someone you don't. And for me it's like substitution, like, okay, who do I really love, pretend they're them
Uh,
or whatever. Just like
Interesting.
having the character thoughts instead of my own.
Do you do you feel once you're done with it, are you happy with what you've been able to accomplish? Like even if you didn't like the person and you put on the, you do your performance with them, are you happy with what you're able to accomplish after the fact, or you still have it in your mind like I want to get out of here because this guy's talking too much?
Yeah, I think I'm still able to like appreciate the scene or the movie, but it sometimes I'm watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, I could not. It like takes me back to that day that we shot it, and I'm like, oh my God, that was such an awful day. Like that was so hard, or that was, I couldn't stand that actor or whatever. But I mean, that's just like a fleeting thought. And then I'm like, because when you're watching a movie, you're like in the story,
Right,
and
of course.
yeah.
Do you feel good about your performance in this film?
Um, Certain scenes, yes. Certain scenes, I'm like, oh, I should have done something else. And it's hard too when it's this fresh. It's like always the first time watching a movie myself, I'm always like this. I'm just like, it's just so hard to watch yourself. And then like after I see it a couple times, I'm like, okay, it's not as bad as I'm very hard on myself the first
Yeah.
time. Usually, I'm like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. But then I see it a couple more times. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not
So
as
you
terrible as I thought I was.
so you've never watched a performance of yourself where you thought, "Oh, this was great." Not once?
I don't know about great. I'm like always looking to see like what could I have done better.
Mm,
But I do find a pattern in where if it's a scene where I've done a lot of improv, I really like it because everything
mm.
comes off more natural. It's very reactive. So Steve is great. He let us improv a lot, and like we already had a great script to work with. So I really like the bidet scene and the Murano glass scene. Like I think that flowed really well,
Oh,
and
so that
you
was all
see all the
improv?
characters. Not all of it. We had like a
Okay.
base, and then but Steve let us like improv a lot.
Oh, interesting.
And Zaramak was just hilarious as Dave and gave us a lot to work off of. Um, but yeah, I think overall I'm happy with my performance in this. And like I loved the cast. I loved the crew. Everyone was a joy to work with, and that always helps bring out a better performance.
I asked Daniel because I've heard a lot of people
And
who
I asked Daniel, and he said he hated you.
he hated me.
No, no, I'm just kidding. I thought
Oh, shit.
you were. It would be so funny if I was like, I loved everyone. Everyone was great to work with, and you're like, okay, because I asked Daniel, and he said the cast was very difficult to work with.
I see what you're saying.
No, what
Okay.
you're saying? You asked
No,
me.
no, no, no. I got it. No, I was like, he hated me. I was like, what did I do? No, no, no. I got it. Okay. What was it? What was my question? Oh, I remember now. So I had heard this a million times from a lot of people who've gone over to Italy. And the most common thing I've heard was that apart from the food being really good, but the food is made so well to the point where you can eat a lot of it and not gain a single pound. In fact, you lose more weight along the way. I had asked that to Daniel, and I asked him, did you experience it? Like, yeah, we ate a lot, but we lost a lot of weight. And I was like, so, so he was explaining to me like that whole situation where apparently you guys didn't have a lot of time to kind of go out and about, but you had time to go to a restaurant each time, each evening, I think, where we hung
Yeah,
out, ate at a different restaurant, and then the next night, same exact thing. So essentially, my
that's
question to you is more
amazing.
about like the experience with the food over there for yourself. Like when you tried it, was it as good as many people make it seem like? And two, did you also lose weight in the process? Well, too, the most consistent thing that I've heard from everybody that's gone over there and tried the food.
That's a good question. And I thought you were going to say when you asked Daniel, he told you how much I ate in particular because he was like, you are eating so much. And then at the Culver Theater screening that we went to a couple weeks ago, he was like, oh my God, you ate so much. And I was like, yeah. So I was definitely enjoying the food. The food was amazing. I think in Venice, I loved it, but then after I traveled around, I had like insane experiences in Verona and Florence and Rome. And Bologna was like very, very heavy. I was not a fan of the food. There was like a lot of red meat and like
Oh,
just in like cow, tripe. So like
oh,
cow intestines and stuff like that. It was just very heavy. It was delicious, but you can't eat a lot of it. But I definitely loved the food, and I don't remember if I lost or gained weight because when I travel, I can't go to the. This is TMI, but it's funny. But I can't like it's hard to go to the bathroom when I travel, so I didn't for like 2 weeks, and my stomach was like out to. I looked 8 months pregnant, and so I probably gained weight for
that's
a bit, and then
interesting.
yeah.
But overall, the food was as good as a lot of people make that had made it seem like. So did it live up to the hype from your experience then?
I
Apart
think
from
so
the
for sure.
okay
Yeah. And like you'd think you'd get sick of eating
pizza,
pasta all the time,
pasta,
but
yeah.
yeah, didn't. It was great.
Is there a difference in the taste of pizza over there than it is here in America from your experience?
Not really. Everyone's
Really?
like so. I'm not a pizza elitist though. I think a
Okay.
lot of people are.
Yeah.
Even within America, they're like, this isn't New York or Chicago pizza.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
pizza's pizza. It's all just kind of bread with
It's
sauce.
true, but there are some places that just make it so much better than others, at least from my
For
experience.
crust, 100%
For
too.
crust,
Like,
that's
crust is
100% true. I agree with you
big.
on that one.
Yes.
But you said you don't notice a difference at all in the taste when it comes to in this case for pizza.
I mean, I
I find
can
that
tell the
interesting
differences.
actually.
It
You
was like
said that.
some of the pizza I had in Italy tastes like some of the pizza I'd had in the States. I think there's a
Interesting.
lot of Italians in America, and they've done a
True.
very good job. Like if you go to a mom and pop pizza shop, like I think it's for me, it feels like
The
it.
same,
It was very
but
yeah
not
the
as
same.
greasy as some of the stuff over here.
I mean, I'm not saying Italy and Pizza Hut aren't different. Like yes, for sure, or like CPK, but I worked at this restaurant forever that had these wood oven fire pizzas with thin crust, and they were so good, and they tasted just like the pizzas in Italy.
Interesting.
And I ate a lot of pizza when I worked there, so maybe that's why I'm like really good pizza.
What was the best thing you tried over there that you had never tried before?
I'm trying to think if I had anything that I hadn't had before. Um,
Or
oh, a big thing was squid ink pasta with cuttlefish. in Venice. It was
Oh
like
yeah,
the
that's
local
Daniel told us
kettle.
his favorite dish he had out
Yes,
there. Yeah,
it was
yeah.
really good.
Interesting.
It was kind of like octopus or squid tasting. But the best meal I had was in Verona. It was this like truffle thing. It all kind of
Really
blends together too. I ate so much, and I was there for like 2.5 weeks, so I was just like, it all
interesting.
blends. I love the maybe it was called in Venice, actually everywhere, but I think it's called croquettes or something. Croquetas. It was
Oh yeah,
like
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
the
yeah,
little bread with
yeah. Yeah.
cheeses and meats or
Hmm.
olive tapenade. Those I love that because it's like a little snack and you get variety. So
Do you think that the food, from your experience, when you went to France and in this case with Italy, obviously there's a difference in the cuisines out there, but did you like one more over the other from your times there?
that's a good question. Yeah, I think I haven't been to France in probably 7 or 8 years. And I think if I went now, I would love it because um, I don't know. I think as a kid, I couldn't appreciate French food as much. Like, it's very weird. Like, one of my cousin's weddings was like this 14-course meal. One of the whole courses was tomato themed, and there was like a tomato mousse and a tomato blah blah blah, and then we had baby pigeon, and then we had like there was just all this crazy French food that now I would probably like freak out and love. Like, I'm such a foodie, but as a kid, I was just like, this is kind of weird. And so I think overall, I liked the food in Italy more,
Okay.
but French. And I think Italian food felt fresher too. Like, French
Yeah.
food's gotten lighter, but you know they it's a lot of croissants and
Hmm.
cheese and all that. But same with Italy. I guess they're both kind of. You know what? Italy had a ton of arugula,
Oh,
rocket
really?
lettuce in everything, and I love arugula. So I think that
Interesting.
was awesome. I had like this giant arugula salad at every meal. So
When you came back here, though, and you ate food here, did you miss the food over there?
no, I
Really?
did not. I was like, I'd eaten Italian food for like 2.5 weeks straight, and then I came back and it was Thanksgiving, and I got to go to my mom's amazing cooking and have like, traditional
Uh,
American food, Thanksgiving food. So it was, I like diversity. Like, I
okay.
couldn't eat Italian food every day. I'm like, wow, they literally eat Italian food every single day here.
Wh-
Imagine.
When you came back here, though, after you had shot and then you had your vacation after the fact, um, did your perspective change on about yourself as far as like, your experiences and what you had gone through, with everyone you worked with, and then coming back home? Like, did you feel different about yourself as far as, the fact that you've gotten the part you mentioned before that Steve had remembered you from an audition that you had done from a year or two ago, and
Hmm.
then he says, can you come back in here to audition for this part? I think it'd be good for. You got the part. You shot in LA, then you go to Italy. So it's like it almost sort of like as if though things had opened up for you and then just kept going from there, going through all of that and then coming back. Did you feel a little different?
It definitely felt like a lifetime dream came true, like dream come true.
Mm,
Because I had part of the appeal of being an actor to me was you work with all these different people, you can travel for it, you can shoot on location. And I'd auditioned for a lot of stuff that shot abroad, but never booked anything
mm,
that shot out of the US. And so when I got this, I was like, wait, am I and my character gets to go to Italy? Yes. I'm like, okay, no way. Like, this is too good to be true. Something's gonna happen.
mm.
And then my contract was signed. I was still like, something's gonna happen. And then it was like we started shooting in LA, and I was still like, it wasn't until I was on the plane going to Italy that I was just like, oh my God, this is happening. And I was like on cloud nine, literally in the clouds. And then It was just like everything I'd ever imagined. It was just as fun as I thought it would
Right.
be. And so I think it just really felt like this amazing feeling of like gratitude and appreciation and accomplishment. Like, wow, I got to do this thing I always wanted to do, and it was even better than I imagined.
So
And
would
I
you
think it
say,
was just motivating. It was like,
right?
gave me motivation. Like, I want to keep doing this so I can try to do that again.
Do you think things happen for a reason though? For you to go through that experience, prior, all the hardships and then getting the part the way that you did, the way everything turned out. Um, and if you do believe it, I want to know why. And if you don't, I would also like to know why.
I think when things are going badly, I tell myself everything happens for a reason because that's when you need the reminder, It's like
Yeah.
everything happens for a reason and like you find it makes you find the reason. You're like, "Oh, this is a good thing because of this," and like see the silver lining. But
Mhm.
when something amazing happens, so I see what you're saying. Like, do you think I did it happen for a reason that I like kind of took a break? But I don't know. I think or maybe in this case, like it happened for a reason and it like gave me the motivation to start to like throw myself back into acting. But also, I think another thing that helped get me back into it was after this film, I was not in LA for 6 months. I was like in and out, but I was in Sacramento for a month, cat sitting while my parents were gone, and then I was in Central America for a couple weeks, and I don't know, I was just kind of all over the place, and I was still auditioning kind of like with self tapes, but I wasn't booking anything because I was so stressed and distracted. And so I think it took that 6 months of being like, I can't wait to be back in LA and present and like have the ability to really focus on acting stuff again.
Are you happier now as a result of what's happened so far?
Yeah, I am
Okay.
happier. Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was just really feeling burnt out and
Right.
unmotivated, and I feel like happier now,
Well, even
for sure.
after when you got the part with normal, and I think when I spoke with you about it, if I remember correctly, you did mention before about feeling burnt out at that time, and then you got the gig, and the circumstances that led you to it, and what was presented to you, etc. Um, but did you feel that? Did you have the same exact feelings as you do now back then? Having the opportunity to play a lead, a co-lead for that matter, in a film. None of did any of those feelings ever come to mind at all about, this is going really well. It's great. I got a part, a co-lead in a movie. Um, I'm just curious about what your thought process was after everything was said and done, even after the conversation you and I had had. Like, I'm just curious, what your headspace was at
Mm,
that time. Like, if you felt that same exact feeling as you are right now.
yeah, I don't know. I can't remember either if like when we talked, I know I was living in Lawndale, and I know I booked an episode on SWAT when I was living there, and I don't remember if it was before or after we talked, but like
It had to
that
been
gave me a lot of
after.
motiv. Yeah, okay, because
Yeah.
I think that kind of gave me motivation again too, because I don't get very many TV auditions, and like I finally got one, and then I booked it, and it was this awesome part.
Yeah.
Like it was
You were I
this,
think, in the hospital too for that scene, if I
yeah,
remember. Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
emotional, and it was really cool. And so I think maybe, but no, I don't feel like it's similar headspace with normal. And I think with normal, it took a couple years to come out. This movie, the pace is really quick. Like we finished shooting it in November and
Mm.
it's already picture wrapped, sound wrapped, being submitted to festivals. Like the process for that with normal was more like 2 years at least, I think.
Mm.
So this one I'm like, wow, this is awesome that he got it through post so quickly. I was really impressed.
When you look back at your experiences with normal, having that excitement about getting a cold, because I remember you auditioned for the part, the
Oh,
babysitter,
the
Nance,
nanny,
Nan,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Maggie.
then, McGrinder, I think's his name, had said,
Hmm.
"Well, I've thought about the lead role instead." And you're like, "Really?" And then you obviously got the part and went from there.
Yeah.
When when you look back at that for yourself, did you feel optimistic at that time, getting the part, working on it, and then the events after the fact? Did you have some sort of optimism about how things were looking for you, especially when you got the
Yeah.
part for SWAT?
That's a good question. I think with normal, like I was like, yeah, this is big, like, or I didn't think it was huge, but I was like, this is really cool. It's like my first lead in a feature film. And then at one of the festivals, someone from NBC came up to me and was like, hey, I want to get your info to add to our like file of actors or whatever. And I was like, oh, maybe will lead to other stuff.
Yeah.
And it never did. And so I think that now I'm like, I'm not in this mindset of like, oh, this is like a break necessarily, or like this will
Right.
lead to other stuff. I'm just enjoying it for what it is. I think
So
I
you
learned that lesson of not being like,
one day at a time is essentially what you're looking at.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And like just enjoying this film for what it is and feeling lucky that I got to work on it. And yeah, just enjoy this film for what it is and not see it as a vessel for something else, you know?
So you're not looking at it in a sense of like looking at bigger and better things, but more finding opportunities that speak to you, consistency, obviously they'll pay you as well too. Is that kind of the lens you're looking through where when it comes to your career now, or did you
Right
always have that
now.
mindset?
I think I just, I don't know. I think maybe I like almost had blinders on before where I was like taking anything I could get and just like I love acting, so I was like, oh, I'll do anything. But now I think I've just realized like no, there's certain stuff I like more and I have the luxury of getting to pick and choose now. Like I have a better job and so I think I'm just enjoying that of like getting to do projects I like and like I really love stories that. Sorry, there's some crazy noise going on.
It sounds
Hopefully
like
you
a
can't hear
plane.
it. Yeah, but it's happening in my apartment courtyard. It sounds like someone's dragging a body through it in a garbage bag. But yeah, I think I'm just trying to do more stuff that brings me joy
Okay.
instead of just taking anything.
Do you consider yourself, I guess this is a two-parter, but would you consider yourself as someone very easily to get along with? I'm talking about as far as acting is concerned, but I'm also speaking about in this perspective of like someone that's approachable because in this business, if you get to a point in your career where you're more in demand, and that means more people are going to want to speak with you, and they're going to want to
Mm.
approach you for whether it be I like your work or I want to work with you, et cetera, et cetera. Do you feel do you feel like you're approachable in the way that you can, you're open to listening to other people to hear them out, or are you very selective about who you want to speak with in that kind of a capacity where you're not, because you said you had blinders, I'll take whatever I can, but now you feel like you told me just now you're in a position where you can choose your work, but has anything changed about how you are, how you want to approach things, and how, and therefore how people are going to approach you as a result
I
of like
understand what
things?
you're saying. That's a really good question. I think I'm still super open-minded and like it's just as much about the project as the people. Like
Right.
there are certain people I love working with and I would do anything. If they ask me like, "Hey, we're making something, do you want to be part of it?" I'm like, "Yes." I don't even care what it is. Like I know you're funny and like it's
Right.
going to be great or I know even if it sucks, I'm going to have a great time with you. So, uh yeah, I think I'm still open to hearing and about anything, and then making a decision from there. Um, yeah, I think it mainly is just concerning commercials and like even this year I did I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do another student film for free because I really want to work on something cool and creative." And my call time was like 5 a.m. or something. I was like, oh my God. So I get up at 4 and I'm getting ready to leave. And I see an email that was sent at 2 a.m. that was like, hey, there was a problem with the location. We're not filming. And I was like, and I had turned down a paid job that day because I had already said yes and was committed to them. And I was like, I'm not going to be a jerk and take the paid job because I've already committed to this. They're counting on it. So I was like, are you kidding me? I like lost another job over this and now we're not even filming. And so I think I had been like in this mindset of like, I'm going to do free work again because I just want to have fun. And now I'm kind of back to like, when there's money involved, people care more. And yeah. And like
Yeah.
they never rescheduled either. And
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, it was so awful. And I couldn't believe like, and I hadn't gone to a friend's birthday party the night before, I think, or I'd skipped something the night before because I had to get up early. I was just so mad. I was like, oh, the sacrifices I've made for this film that now isn't even being shot. Whereas if it
So,
was paid, there wouldn't be a problem with the location because
right. Because
they would
everyone's
have paid
putting the
for
money
it.
down to make it work.
Yes.
So explain to me then about situations like that for yourself where you take something and you miss out, whether it does go through or it doesn't in this case here. How do you deal with having to not be around? In this case, like you talk about being at a, I think it was a birthday party or something the night before, and you couldn't go because you slept early, so you can get up early. When you're dealing with that for yourself, and especially when you're at that point where you are burnt out and you're still more or less in that momentum for yourself, or just keep going and going despite the burnout. How did you learn to deal with the choices you had to make where you have to miss out because you're obligated to another to a project, whether it be free, paid, whatever the case may be,
Mm-hmm.
but you notice for yourself that this isn't going anywhere for me, but I've already committed to it. Now I can't go to this birthday party. I can't hang out with my friends or my family. I have to go do this. And you may have enjoyed it, but when you think about it now, maybe, at the time you were saying to yourself, is this even worth it now? Because I'm not getting any sort of satisfaction out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're dealing with that, especially at that
Yeah.
time, and then going forward with this here, especially if you're getting momentum where there are great opportunities, good paying
Mm-hmm.
ones as well too, are you prepared? Are you preparing for the sacrifice you're going to have to make where you will have to miss out on some important things in your personal life, families. But
Yeah.
before it was more like you take whatever you can, didn't work out, but you missed out on birthday parties. But now you have more opportunities, better opportunities, but you're also going to miss out on the same events as well too in the future.
Yeah.
You think
That's a
about
good
that for yourself?
question. Yeah. It's definitely it's a good question, and it's just decisions. Like it just happened actually, I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at this big family reunion. We have a big family reunion every 5 years for my grandma's birthday, and she turned 90 this year. She's turning
Hmm.
90. So we had this, and it's my family from France, and then my family's all over the East Coast too, and like the Midwest, and it's only my immediate family in California. So I only get to see these people every 5 years. So I was going to North Carolina Thursday night, and I was gonna be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, what part of North Carolina?
It was in at Lake Logan, right outside Asheville.
Oh, it's not far from where I'm
It
at.
was really pretty.
It's
No
not far at all.
way.
No, yeah, I'm
It
literally
was
like two and a
beautiful.
half hours from that area here, so I
Oh,
know exactly what you're talking about.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Very
interesting. You were
nice.
close by.
Yes, that was right down the street. So we had this big family reunion planned, and my agent calls me and is like, "Hey, you have an audition for Target or a callback for this Target commercial." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "The shoot dates are," and I was like, "Oh." And he's like, "Don't tell me." And I was like, "No, I'm not available. I'm gonna be in." It was like the shoot days were Thursday, Friday, and I was like, I'm going Thursday night. So like, if it shoots Thursday, I can do it. If Friday not, he's like, "Okay, just go to the callback. We'll see what happens." So I go to the callback, and then I don't even get put on avail, like which is where they check your availability and then book you. I just got a call. It was like, "You booked it," and I was like, "Oh," this is my agent. I'm like, "Okay, but Thursday or Friday? Because if it's Thursday, I can do it." He's like, "They need you for both days," and I was like, "Well," and that was the kind of thing where I'm like, "I'm not gonna change my travel plans." And he was like, "I think they want you for both." I was like, okay, well, if they need me for both, I can't do it. If they can shoot me on Thursday, I can. And he's like, okay, I'll see. So it turned out they needed me both days, and it was just the kind of thing where I'm like, I'm not gonna move my flight from Thursday night to Friday night. My boyfriend would be going alone Thursday night, or we'd have to change both tickets. I'm gonna miss a whole day with my family, get there, like, I'd have to fly out Friday night, get there Saturday morning, I'd be jet lagged, or I don't know, tired from the red eye, not even enjoy. I'm like, it's just not worth sacrificing, like, time with my family for a Target commercial. No offense, Target, but like, if it was like, oh, like an amazing opportunity on a TV show or like some crazy, it's just project dependent. But I'm at the point now where I'm like, Target commercial, not worth missing a day of my family reunion.
Right.
So yeah, it's just tough dealing with like sacrifices and, real life versus, because acting stuff's so volatile, which is the thing. Like, it all comes down to, are you free this one day? And if you're not, on to the next. So, but you don't want to live your life like being available all the time. So I've just learned, like, live your life. And if something really crazy does come up that conflicts, then you can switch stuff. But if all that comes up is a Target commercial,
not worth your time.
No. Yeah. And it wasn't even a union commercial. It's like, you're Target. You're a Fortune 500 company. You should be paying actors union scale.
That's interesting.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All the big brands that do non-union commercials, like Match.com, I will always hate, owned by, because like one of the first commercials I did when I moved out here was a Match.com commercial. They paid me $100, and they aired it like over 10,000 times on broadcast television. They aired it in Canada. Everyone I ever knew saw it and thought I was on Match.com.
So
that was terrible.
When you are thinking about the selection, the decision you're going to make when it comes to what you're going to pick out, um, is it easier to say no now before, whereas you couldn't? I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't, but you didn't as much because you just want to take as much work as you can. So
Yeah,
so when it becomes
absolutely
easier, like
easier now.
what's easier about it for you now?
Yeah, I think it was like, it was, I think naivete. Like when I first moved to LA, I was like, I'm gonna be an actor. I gotta do everything, put everything into it. And I think it was thinking like that every single job could be like a break,
Right.
And I think it's just experience now of being like, a Target commercial is not gonna, like, sure, you can make a connection on that job, but
Sure.
I think it's also just having my priorities straight. Like, the things that really matter in life are my family and my friends, and I'm not gonna, and like, acting stuff will fall, the pieces will fall into place as I go. It doesn't, I think when I was young, I was like, it needs to happen right now. And now I'm like, the ship sailed, like, just do it and enjoy it and don't make every job so precious.
I remember there was an actors discussion that had Michael Keaton, I think Shia LaBeouf, and maybe Robert De Niro was in it too. I couldn't remember,
Oh,
but he had talked about, because there was a period of time where Michael Keaton was like getting tons of work, after Beetlejuice, Batman, what else, Mr.
yes.
Mom, all these other movies. And there was a period of time where he just wasn't working as much as he used to. He'd done a few films here and there, some independent ones too. But he had said something that I'll never forget that I thought was very interesting, which was the fact, and it's in relation to what you just said now, where he had said that he had his son, and he was like, I had missed out on a lot of opportunities, but I didn't care because I wanted to be home with my kid. Acting is always going to
Yeah.
be around, and it's going to come. If it's
Yeah. And my
meant to
kid's
happen,
not
it's
going
going
to
to
be a
come.
kid forever.
Right. And he's like, and
That's
once my
huge.
son had grown up and now he has his life, I was able to go back in with much more ease because I mean those weren't his exact words. That's essentially what he was trying to say though, that the opportunity started coming back wasn't easy, but it came back eventually.
Right.
So when I hear that, that's something that I remember distinctly thinking at the time, like this guy figured it out where his priorities were. And I think and if I was an actor, especially if I was, in the early stages of like, my 20s or whatnot, I would have probably done the exact same thing you had. I don't know, no, I know for a
Hmm.
fact I would have done that way. I would have been all acting and get whatever opportunity, and each one is gonna be the next big thing, et cetera, et cetera. I would have been completely
Right.
um immature about it. Well, hearing him
Totally.
say that um shed a lot of interesting thing for me to think about, where I thought if every person thought like that in life, and I'm talking about in general, I think the world would
Hmm.
probably be a much better place where you know where your priorities were, rather than, sorry, mom, I know you're dead, but I have to go take this part over here, and I'm gonna miss out on the funeral,
Right.
whatever else. And it's something about that I think now, it completely changed. But hearing Michael Keaton say that made me realize the importance of like what's the priority. And I think a lot of people forget that it's those who you are close with that you'll never get to have those experiences ever if you miss out on those
Exactly.
opportunities. So that's why I was asking that
Exactly.
question too, because I think that's kind of the reason why I remember him saying that. But when you think about your future now, do you think more in terms of like what's the best opportunity that can come down, or again, one day at a time, and if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, then I'm happy with what I've accomplished. If it were to stop right now,
Yeah, I think it's like one day at a time, and I think I still have a lot of ambition and dreams, and like want to be a part of projects just because I really love it. And so I think what I've learned is to really enjoy the process and like really just love my acting class. Like I get to act in it, I get to learn, it's challenging, it's like a puzzle, it teaches me good scene analysis. So I think just really enjoying the actual work instead of um, just focusing so hard on like, I don't know how to say it, but yeah, I think just like really enjoying it every single day, whether it's a project or class, like you're getting to act and then just take the roles one at a time.
if this was all going to stop right now for you, like
Hmm.
gigs or auditions aren't coming, or if they are coming, you're not getting the parts that you're auditioning for. Calls are not coming in where maybe before, hey, I got a project I'm working on, just completely stops. Would you be content with what you've been able to accomplish so far up to this point with everything you've gone through, and look back and say, it's if this were to stop right now, I'm happy with what I've been able to accomplish here, and I may want more, but if this is it, that's good enough for me.
No, I think I think it would feel incomplete. Like I want to keep growing. I want to keep doing roles that are more and more and more challenging. Um, I want to keep working with people. I think I would be really, really, really sad. And
Really?
like if I couldn't act anymore, I would still do improv and like do plays. Like if I couldn't do film for whatever reason, like I would definitely still, or maybe I'd start writing. But yeah, like I think at the end of the day, I'm creative and I'm an artist, and I like really need something
To let out your
to,
creative flow.
yeah. So
I
I
see.
think that would be really devastating, and I would feel unsatisfied, like unfulfilled.
Interesting.
Like I'm happy with what I've done so far, but I
You
don't
want
feel like
more.
my career is over. Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah. Like I'm not like, all right, if someone was like, okay, you have to move back to Sacramento and have a family right now and you can't do that, I'd be like, no, I'll have a family in LA. I want to keep, you know, keep acting.
The first time we had a conversation here, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I've learned a lot. I have gained a lot of different perspective on how I looked at myself as more or less as an interview or a conversation, if you will, that I had learned from you, as I mentioned before. So when we had this booked, I was very excited to speak with you again because I enjoyed our conversation so much that I felt like it was just going to be um, basically picking up where we last left off. And I still feel that we had that today, at least from my perspective. I felt like that was there was a lot of things that
Okay.
I didn't ask you the first time around, didn't think of asking you, that I'm asking you now, that you've been very forthcoming to share with me, which I'm very grateful for. But with all that being said, though, I had I've also come to realize too in the process for myself that um conversing in a lot of ways is an art form that I never really thought about a long, long, long time ago until I
Hmm.
started doing this. And there are a few people that I've come across that have made me realize, this is why I enjoy doing what I do. And there's quite a few that I've come across that really have impacted me. But there are certain conversations that I have with guests that made me realize a certain angle that I didn't think about before that made me
Mm.
reevaluate myself and look at how I look at myself, how I view the conversation, or whatever the case may be. And you are actually one of those people that really
Oh.
had that effect on me because it got me thinking more about um, being comfortable with asking more direct questions, and then I'm not saying not to concern myself about what other people are thinking, but just really being straightforward with it, and then just let it flow from there. Because I think I always had a
Yeah.
hard time trusting myself to just ask the questions I want to ask.
Hmm.
And then when I had the conversation, how assertive you were and how blunt you were, especially in that email really changed a lot about how I viewed you. It really, a lot of it changed. I was like, holy shit,
Just
bro.
saying my name's not
It, it's
Suzanne.
not Suzanne, it's Susanna. And then you explain, your the context behind all of it. And that really changed a lot. I was like, oh shit. Like I did because I didn't think of it as like, I know I knew for a fact you weren't be saying it to be rude. I know that's not what was coming from.
Mhm.
But that assertiveness that you had changed a lot about, okay, so next time, be very careful on how you look at things, how you type things, and before you send them out. But not
Um,
because, because you're going to insult the person. It wasn't that. It was just more about the attention to certain details that I
oh,
didn't consider. That because I was, like I told you before, I was just moving, go, move, go like that.
yeah.
And little things like that
Yeah.
put me in my place, for lack of a better way of saying it. And it taught me a lot about how to look at a conversation, which is find 50 questions and then whichever one doesn't work, that's the next one. If she stops talking, then go with this one. Just like find what works. And that
Cool.
particular conversation had changed a lot. Various other ones as well too, but I can truthfully say that with you, that assertiveness that you have, I should say, really put a lot of perspective for me.
Hmm.
So, if anything, you have bestowed a gift onto me that I did not know I needed, that I'm glad I've gotten from you. So, I mean that with from everything that I've from the bottom of my heart is what I'm saying.
Thanks,
So, thank you for
Rob.
that.
Thanks.
With that being said, though, you have a fan in me, and I think that if you decide you want to stick with comedy, as far as stand-up's concerned, I think you'd be really good at it as well too, because
Oh,
you really caught me
wow.
by surprise with the jokes you were coming up with, and you actually got me out laughing out loud as well too. I also
Yay.
believe, and I mean that too, but I also believe that I still believe that there's still something inside where you have a really good idea somewhere that's just brewing and waiting to come out. And that's where I believe that where the best work is going to come, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. I need to hear that because, yeah, I feel like I would do want to write something for myself, like whether it's a short film or like a one-woman show or something like that.
Mhm.
But I just like haven't had the motivation or made the time, and like hearing that from you is very motivating and helpful and like inspiring. So, thanks for
Well,
saying that.
you're welcome. And I mean that too, but there, there are a lot of things that I've noticed from you that I've picked up. Like I told you before, when I saw was it connected? I think it was what it was.
Hmm.
Connected and obviously normal. Do you remember the other films that came across as well? The names are escaping me right now, but there was one that you
Yeah.
did where it was kind of like a horror spoof where you dressed up as Freddy.
Franny versus Jadaughter.
That's the
That
one.
was
Yes,
really
yes, yes. I
fun.
saw that one, and I actually
No
enjoyed that one
way.
too.
Thank you for asking
It
or
was on
for
Tubi. It
watching.
was on Tubi, bro.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a lot of fun with it. And I forgot to tell you about it that I saw it. So I'm
Oh my
forgive me for
God,
not remind to let
thanks.
you know.
That
But
director is so fun. Mark.
there was a lot that I've gathered where, even though you had told me before in the past that and even now too, that you really like working with the people and get their story out there. I think that's great. but you're one of the few people that I look at and said there's so much more that you have to offer that I think the best is yet to come. And I think there's so much more that you can offer if you just do it from, from here and just let it out, whether it be writing, stand up, a film you're working on, TV show, whatever the case may be. I would be all ears and anticipating whatever you're working on. And I would hope it takes off for you, not for fame and glory, because I truly don't care about that stuff,
Right.
but more from the sense of like, I got to, the world got to hear your voice, if that makes
Oh,
any sense.
thanks, Rob. You're gonna make me
So,
cry.
uh,
Really sweet.
so that's essentially me giving you your flowers, I meant to say. But there's a there's a lot of excitement that I'm seeing from what I'm gathering from you, even from Daniel as well too. Like after talking to Daniel, he gave me a lot to look at as well too,
Hmm.
perspective wise that I never considered. And then seeing how his
Cool.
career was, where he started beforehand and where things are moving along for him.
Hmm.
Having heard that and then talking to you about it now, kind of seeing a similar trajectory from what I'm understanding, what you've been able to describe here for me.
Hmm.
I'm very excited to see how things will turn out for you moving forward. And my dream with a lot of my guests is that I still can't stay in contact with you. I would love it somewhere down the line where I'm still doing this and then 10, 15 years, whatever the case may be, I'm still doing this. And I hope we get to meet in person or we do this again through Zoom or whatever technology app is out there that's brand new is better. And I get to say, you want to revisit that conversation again and just pick up from where we last left off and then look back at all those things you've done and say, remember when you said this? How do
Yeah.
you feel about it now, so many years later?
That
I
would
would
be so
love for
awesome.
that to happen. And I would hope that whether
Me
you
too.
decide you still stick with this path or a
Hmm.
whole new path altogether, for me, it's more interesting to talk with people who've had a journey that they're finding a fulfillment with what they truly are passionate about, and they get to live out that passion. And if
Yeah.
they've gotten to the point where I don't need to go further with that, I'm cool with it. I want to revisit that conversation again to see what changed. How did that
Right.
happen, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That's what I would love to happen with a lot of the people that I've spoken with, especially the ones that I see a great deal of potential. And again, not for fame and glory, but really just
Hmm.
about the opportunities, the ideas you guys have, the perspective you give from me in this conversation, parlay
Hmm.
that into writing, film directing, whatever the case may be. Because if you've changed that much for me here, imagine whatever art form you take on, how much you can change, not just for me, but for everyone else as well too. And I think
Yeah.
it's extremely valuable for me. But at the same time, I'm in a position where I get to see that growth, and I hope it continues on from that. I do believe it will for you. I really do believe you're that good, especially after seeing Normal and seeing Connected as well too, and the various other things I have been able to come across.
Hmm.
But I think there's so much more that you can offer that it's going to sound really cheesy for me to say this here, but I don't know any other way of saying it. You make the world a better place. Is my
Oh,
perspective there. So I've rambled on enough, but again, like I said, I wanted to tell you that because I really do mean that, and I hope that things will continue getting better for you, and that you are happy in the process as you do it. So that's
thank
my
you, Rob.
flowers to
That's
you.
super, super inspiring and really means a lot. So I appreciate you saying that. And I love talking with you. I think you have it's like such good insights and questions, and you make me think about stuff I
Yeah.
wouldn't think about otherwise. And I'm always really impressed with your research and all the stuff you remember too, and the stuff you notice. So
Yeah.
thank you. And that's why I asked you to talk if you'd want to talk about this film because it was so fun last time. So
Yeah.
thanks for
And
your time.
I'm really happy that you did ask me that because I was going to do it, but I don't think I would have done it as quickly as you had said so in when you
Oh
talked in the
yeah,
comment. I would definitely would
yeah,
have done it, but I think I was in the mindset of like, we'll wait till the film comes out and then I'll say, hey, I saw the
right,
movie or the film's about to come out. What you guys want to talk? But as soon as you said, let's go, I was like, let's do it.
yeah. Well, I'd
So
be curious. Maybe after it comes out, we
yeah,
could do an interview with me and Daniel.
absolutely. I would do it in a heartbeat. So
Fun.
but this is again, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we had a lot more time this time around here too.
Yeah, true.
this was a lot of fun, and I got to learn more about you as a result of the conversation here. So I'm looking forward what else I can learn and what else you can teach me along the way as well too. So thank you for that.
Likewise.
So for the cameras, I'm going to say thank you again, and until next time, cheers to you.